Welcome to the Tired Thinker, where familiarity shivers through the mind like a half-remembered dream, and the present feels haunted by echoes of itself. Tonight, we're listening for that strange lilt in consciousness, the moment you swear you've lived this before, even though you know you haven't. If memory is the story we tell ourselves about who we've been, then déjà vu is the whisper that something else has been telling the story too. A memory without a past. A recollection with no beginning. A scene replaying before it's ever been staged. We ask, if the brain can feel certainty without evidence, what makes reality real? If the mind can remember something that never happened, what does that say about the timeline we trust to define us? Is déjà vu a glitch, a neural echo? Or is it a window into a path we've already walked, in a version of ourselves we don't remember being? Tonight, there are no answers, only invitations. To rest in the strangeness, to notice the uncanny hush of recognition, to wonder whether your memories are records or suggestions. So settle in. Let the mind wander gently toward the familiar that shouldn't be. No panic, just curiosity. Just the quiet pleasure of watching your own perception fold back on itself. But first, where are you remembering from tonight? What hour is repeating itself in your corner of the world? And if these explorations feel like they're echoing something already inside you, a like or a subscribe invites more travelers into these loops of thought that refuse to straighten out. Now, let's begin. The memory arrives without warning. You feel it before you try to explain it. You recognize the moment in front of you, yet you know you have never lived it. You know the conversation. You know the shape of the room. You know what comes next. It does not feel imagined. It feels remembered. But when you search for the place it belongs, the timeline comes up blank. There is no origin to point toward. The memory feels older than your own life. This is the memory with no beginning. Many people have experienced this. Some call it déjà vu. Others describe it as a false memory, but both ideas circle the same core puzzle. There are moments when the brain behaves as if it has stored something that was never stored. The question becomes direct. If you did not place that memory in your mind, who did? The brain builds memory from experience. It uses the hippocampus to encode events, and the cortex to store and retrieve them. This is how the story of the self forms. Each new moment attaches to earlier moments. You become someone with a past, a chain of cause and effect. When that chain breaks, the brain still tries to fill the space. It reaches for patterns, shadows, or familiar structures. Sometimes this creates a memory that feels real without being tied to any lived event. Think of walking into a new building for the first time. You step inside and begin to look around. You know the hallway layout. You know where the windows will be. You know how the floor will sound. You feel you have been there before, but no part of your life story contains this building. This is not imagination in the usual sense. Imagination feels constructed. It carries effort. This does not. This arrives complete. The brain records experience by linking sensation, emotion, and context. But it also makes predictions. It tries to guess what will happen next. This keeps you from being overwhelmed by the constant flow of information. Most of the time, the predictions are correct and the world feels stable. But sometimes the prediction fires before the experience, and the mind mistakes the prediction for memory. This is one explanation for déjà vu. The brain misfires. It sends the signal of recognition before the event that should cause it. Imagine two runners on a track. One runner is the experience you are living. The other is the brain's prediction system. When they run at the same pace, everything feels normal. Experience and expectation match. But if the prediction runner starts to sprint, the brain experiences a strange result. The prediction arrives before the event. The memory appears before the moment. The mind says, "I have lived this," even though you have not. Another explanation involves how the brain stores memory. Sometimes the brain files new experience in long-term memory before processing it in short-term memory. This can occur during stress, distraction, or sensory overload. The brain misroutes the information. Instead of the event being coded as new, it is coded as familiar. You are not recalling something from the past. You are experiencing something new that your brain labels as old the moment it happens. This can feel unsettling. It challenges trust in your own memory. It raises questions about identity. If memory forms the basis of self, what does it mean when memory is uncertain? Now consider false memories. A false memory is not a lie. It is not a conscious fabrication. It is a story the mind believes. The brain prefers continuity. It tries to create meaning from incomplete information. If a detail is missing, the mind supplies one that fits. This is not failure. This is adaptation. It keeps the story of life coherent. Picture a childhood event. You remember the room, the light, the people. You remember a sentence someone said, but later you learn the sentence was never said, or you find out you were not in that room at all. The memory feels real because your brain built it to fill a gap. The construction happens without awareness. The result can feel as real as any lived moment. Families sometimes share false memories. One person recalls a moment, another agrees, a third adds detail. The memory grows a shape, tone, and narrative over time. But when compared to evidence, the event did not happen in that way. The memory formed through repetition, not through occurrence. The mind values the story more than the origin. This leads to a quiet but serious realization. Memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction. Each time you recall a memory, the brain rewrites it. The memory changes to match who you are now. A memory from childhood does not show who you were then. It shows who you are now, remembering who you were then. The memory has no fixed beginning because it rewrites itself each time it is retrieved. This does not make memory unreliable. It makes memory alive. But it also means that the line between true memory and false memory is thinner than most people think. Now return to the original question. If you did not place the memory in your mind, who did? There are several ways to answer. One answer is the brain itself. The memory grew from pattern recognition. It was not placed, it was assembled. Another answer is experience that did not get recorded in clear form. The memory may come from a dream. The mind treats some dreams as lived events. If you dream of standing in a hallway and later walk into a hallway that resembles it, the brain signals recognition. Dreams do not announce themselves as dreams while you recall them. They arrive as memory. Some people experience memories that feel older than the body. They describe familiarity with languages, places, or eras they have no exposure to. This does not require metaphysical explanation. The human brain shares pattern structures that have evolved over thousands of years. A stone archway, a coastline, a certain kind of silence in a room. These are universal patterns. Recognition may come from shared human perception rather than past experience. There is also the quiet possibility that the mind stores more than it acknowledges. You encounter thousands of images and interactions that do not reach awareness. The brain filters constantly. Some of those details may resurface later. The memory feels new because the conscious mind did not store it, but the brain did. So the memory with no beginning is not a mystery of magic. It's a window into how the brain organizes the world. It shows that the experience of self is not linear. It shows that memory is not a simple archive. It shows that familiarity does not require history. A memory that feels like it was always there might not need a first moment. It may form in the present and label itself as past. It may come from a dream or an unnoticed detail. It may be built from pattern and prediction. It may be part of what the brain does to keep you whole in a world that changes faster than you can track. You feel the memory before you try to explain it. You recognize the world before you know why, and the moment sits there, complete, without needing a beginning at all. There are moments when recognition comes before experience. You feel certain you've lived a moment that is unfolding for the first time. You know the pause in someone's sentence. You know how the air feels. You know the rhythm of the scene. The knowledge feels settled, not imagined. Yet, when you search your memory, there is no source. This is the echo without origin. Something inside you responds as if recalling. But there is nothing to recall. The brain works by forming patterns. It predicts outcomes so you can move through the world without confusion. When you reach for a door handle, you do not need to think about how to grip it. You do not need to relearn how to walk across a room. The brain recognizes patterns and prepares your body and attention to act. Most of this happens outside awareness. The predictive systems run in the background. When they work well, you feel steady. The world feels known. But sometimes the prediction arrives a moment too early. The mind receives the signal of recognition before the moment it is tied to. When this happens, the recognition feels like memory. Picture two streams. One stream is the present moment. The other is the brain's internal forecast. Usually, the streams line up. Experience and expectation move together. But if the second stream moves ahead, the brain signals familiarity without experience. It becomes possible to believe you have seen a moment before you have lived it. The recognition has no external source. It comes from the mind's own predictive function. The echo is real, but it does not come from the past. Imagine standing in a store you have never visited. The shelves are arranged in a way that feels known. The overhead lights hum in a tone your brain seems to recognize. A voice speaks near you, and you know what the next sentence will be. You are not remembering the store. You are matching patterns. Your brain has seen other shelves, heard similar tones, watched body language that follows familiar cues. These pieces combine into a structure that feels whole. The familiarity feels deep because it bypasses conscious reasoning. The feeling of recognition without source can also come from the way memory stores fragments. Not every memory is complete. Many are impressions. The smell of a surface warmed by sunlight, the echo of footsteps in a stairwell, the color of an evening sky. These fragments do not belong to a specific moment. They are stored without timestamps. Later, when the present contains similar input, the brain attaches the fragment to the moment. The result feels like memory, but the brain is fitting pieces together to create meaning in real time. Think of hearing a line of dialogue in a film that you feel you have heard before. You cannot name where you heard it. You cannot remember a moment that matches it. The familiarity is not a full memory. It is a pattern match. Your brain recognizes the emotional structure of the sentence. It recognizes the tone. It recognizes the type of situation. The recognition feels like recall, even when no previous event exists. Another layer comes from dreams. People often forget their dreams soon after waking, but the emotional or sensory tone of a dream can remain. If you walked through a corridor in a dream and later find yourself in a similar space, your brain may signal familiarity. But because the dream is not stored as part of your conscious timeline, the recognition seems to float without a source. You are not remembering the dream itself. You are reacting to the structure of it. In some cases, recognition without experience appears when the brain processes information differently than usual. This can happen during stress or fatigue. When the brain is tired, it may route information in a way that confuses new and familiar. New information gets labeled as known. The moment feels repeated, though it is new. The recognition feels strong because the brain tags it with the same signal it uses for genuine memory. Consider sitting in a cafe, listening to conversation and background noise. If your attention drifts, the brain continues processing sound and movement. When your focus returns, the moment feels familiar. You believe you have lived the event before. But what happened was this: the brain recorded part of the moment without conscious awareness. When attention came back, the brain retrieved the stored impressions and played them as memory. The familiarity is real. The experience, however, only occurred once. The feeling can be comforting or unsettling. It can suggest a hidden order. It can suggest that something in you knows more than your conscious awareness. People often search for meaning in this sensation. Some believe it points to past lives. Others believe it reveals alternate timelines or spiritual memory. But the experience does not require explanations beyond the brain's known functions. A system built to recognize patterns, predict outcomes, and fill memory gaps can produce recognition without source. This does not reduce the mystery. It does not strip away the sense of eerie familiarity. It simply shows that the mind and memory do not function like a camera recording the world. The mind constructs reality from patterns and associations. Memory is not a perfect archive. It is an ongoing act of interpretation. Even when recognition arrives without experience, the feeling is real. The moment carries weight. You know something before you can explain it. You respond to a situation before you understand why. And the moment passes, leaving the quiet sense that you touched something hidden. Something inside the mind that works beneath language, beneath narrative. Recognition without source reveals how the brain attempts to keep the world continuous. It shows how identity forms around familiarity, even when that familiarity has no clear origin. The echo is not an error. It is a signal of how the brain keeps you connected to reality, even when the timeline does not appear to line up. You find yourself in a moment that feels familiar. You watch someone reach for a glass. You hear a phrase spoken in a calm tone. You see the light fall across the room in a certain way. You feel a quiet certainty rise. You have seen this before. You are sure of it. But when you search your memory, nothing connects. There is no event, no day, no place where this scene happened. You know it, yet you cannot place it. The mind insists on recognition. The timeline offers nothing. The scene feels like a rerun of something unwritten. This experience is common. It happens to many people at least once in their lives. It can happen during ordinary tasks, standing in a kitchen, riding on a bus, sitting in a conversation. The moment does not need to be dramatic. It simply feels known. The familiarity is strong and immediate. It does not feel imagined. It does not feel guessed. It feels remembered. To understand why this happens, it helps to look at how the brain handles memory. Memory is not a recording. There is no internal film that captures your life in exact form. Instead, memory works through reconstruction. Each time you remember something, the brain rebuilds the memory from pieces. These pieces include sensory impressions, emotional tone, and context. The brain uses these fragments to tell a coherent story. Most of the time, this works well. You feel like your memory is stable. But memory changes each time it is recalled. The brain reshapes the memory to fit who you are now. Now imagine the brain doing something similar with the present moment. It sees the light in the room. It hears the tone of a voice. It notices the shape of a gesture. It compares these features to stored patterns. If the patterns match something from the past, whether fully or partially, the brain signals recognition. But the recognition does not always point to a full memory. Sometimes it connects only to fragments. The fragments feel like completion. The brain fills the gaps and labels the moment as known. Think of reading a story where you only remember certain scenes. Later, when you hear a few lines or see an image that matches the tone of the story, you feel the entire story present in your mind. Even if you cannot recall the details, the familiarity appears. The brain often works in this same layered way. A few cues can create the sense of an entire memory. Consider a simple example. You move into a new apartment. On your first morning there, sunlight falls through the blinds in a familiar pattern. You have never lived in this place, yet you feel you have seen that exact light before. You try to recall where. Perhaps it was a hotel, perhaps a childhood home. The memory remains unclear. The familiarity feels complete, even when the context does not. The scene is not a memory replayed. It is a pattern the brain recognizes and expands. Another example helps. Picture sitting at a cafe table. A server brings a drink and sets it down with a slight turning motion. The sound of ceramic on wood is soft. Someone near you laughs. The sound of the laugh, the gesture, and the light combine. Your brain has seen similar configurations before, maybe many times in many places. The patterns align. The brain signals a match. The moment feels rehearsed. This is not the brain lying. It is the brain working to predict and make sense of the world. The mind relies on familiarity to reduce effort. If it recognizes patterns, it does not need to analyze each moment from scratch. Recognition feels efficient and natural. Sometimes the scene you swear you've seen comes from dream memory. Dreams often use real locations, real people, and familiar shapes, but dreams do not always get stored in a clear way. They may be forgotten soon after waking. Later, when the waking world contains a pattern similar to the dream, the brain reacts as though recalling a memory. But because the dream lacks clarity or timeline, the recognition feels disconnected. You recognize a place without ever having visited it. You recall a conversation that never happened during waking life. The scene becomes a rerun without origin. There is also the role of the mind's predictive system. The brain constantly predicts what will happen next based on past experience. It runs ahead of the moment to prepare you. Most of the time, the prediction matches the incoming experience. When prediction and experience align closely, the brain's recognition feels smooth and unremarkable. But when the prediction arrives before the awareness of the actual moment, it can feel like memory. The sequence of awareness shifts. You notice the sense of recognition first, and the sensory moment second. This inversion makes the moment feel as though it has happened before. The brain may also script moments by pattern completion. When you encounter situations that resemble common social scenes, greetings, shared meals, familiar routines, the brain activates scripts. These mental scripts guide behavior and expectation. Because the script feels practiced, the moment feels remembered. But it is not a memory. It is the mind preparing you to act without needing to think through every detail. A familiar scene can also arise from emotional memory. If the emotional tone of a moment matches a past experience, the brain links them. You may not remember the past event itself, but the emotional pattern returns. The scene feels known because you have felt the sensation before. The recognition comes from affective memory, not event memory. All of these processes share a common purpose. The brain tries to maintain continuity. It tries to keep the world from feeling chaotic. Familiarity offers steadiness. When the mind encounters something that fits a pattern it knows, even partially, it marks the moment as recognizable. This marking can feel like memory, even when it is not tied to a specific past event. The scene you swear you've seen is a product of how the mind organizes experience. It is a signal of the brain's effort to understand, predict, and maintain coherence. The moment feels like a rerun because the brain has found familiar structure in something new. The familiarity is real. Even if the scene has no exact match in your past, you feel the moment arrive before you fully step into it. Someone speaks, or the light shifts in the room, or you turn your head at a certain angle, and something inside you pauses. You know what comes next. You know what someone will say. You know the expression on their face before it appears. The feeling is quiet and certain. You have already been here, but you also know you have not. The moment is new, yet it feels remembered. It sits between memory and the present, like a ghost of something that has not happened yet, but somehow already has. This is a form of déjà vu. Most explanations tie it to memory errors, prediction signals, or fragments of dreams. Those explanations describe parts of what happens, but they do not touch the sensation many people report. The feeling that the familiarity comes from a future self, not a past one. The moment feels less like a memory and more like a message. It feels like something your mind has already lived in another form and is now nudging you to notice. The idea of a future self does not need to be mystical. It can be understood through how the brain makes predictions. The mind constantly forecasts what will happen. It does this to prepare your actions and keep you safe. Most of these predictions happen outside awareness. When they are accurate, the experience feels smooth, but sometimes the prediction carries emotional weight. Sometimes the brain has already run a simulation of the moment before you experience it. When the real moment arrives, the sense of familiarity is strong. It feels like the self you will be in the next second is reaching back toward the self you are now. Think of walking down a hallway for the first time. You have never seen it before, but your brain has walked down thousands of hallways. It has stored patterns of light, sound, and distance. If the hallway triggers a strong match, the brain activates the prediction model ahead of the actual perception. You walk through the space with the feeling of memory. You feel as if you have been there already. The future of the next few seconds has slipped into the present. Now consider a conversation. Someone begins a sentence. You know the rest of the sentence before they say it. You do not remember this conversation. You have never spoken these exact words before, but you know the rhythm and the emotional tone. You can feel how the thought will unfold. Your mind has already simulated the next moment. The déjà vu comes from recognizing the simulation as it becomes real. This kind of recognition can feel like guidance. Some people describe it as a sign that they are on the right path. Others describe it as a checkpoint. It can feel like a reassurance that you are moving in a direction your mind has prepared for. This does not mean destiny or fate. It means the mind builds internal maps that extend ahead of you. When your current moment fits the map, the brain signals familiarity. The sensation becomes stronger when the emotional tone is deep. Imagine meeting someone for the first time, yet feeling you have known them for years. Their expression, their posture, and the way they speak all match patterns your mind knows well. The familiarity may come from past relationships, from stories you have heard, or from internal expectations about connection. The recognition feels like memory, but it is the alignment of emotional patterns. The brain is predicting how the relationship might unfold. The future version of the connection is influencing the present perception. There's also the role of dreams. Dreams often simulate possible futures. They use familiar patterns to create imagined scenarios. Most dreams fade, but the emotional imprint can remain. Later, when the waking world contains a moment that resembles the emotional pattern of a dream, the brain signals recognition. You may feel the scene as something that has already happened, but what you are recognizing is the emotional shape, not a literal memory. Picture a dream in which you stand on a balcony during sunset. The tone of the dream is calm. The light is warm. In waking life, months later, you find yourself standing on a balcony at sunset with the same emotional posture. Your brain recognizes the feeling from the dream, but not the dream itself. The result feels like memory from another life. It feels like the moment was waiting for you. There is another layer. Identity is not fixed. You have many potential selves. Your mind constantly adjusts who you are becoming. Déjà vu can happen when your current experience matches a path your mind had considered but not yet lived. The future self is not a separate being. It is a version of you that existed as possibility. When your life enters the path that aligns with that possibility, the brain signals familiarity. The moment feels like a return to something you have not yet lived. Think of choosing between 2 jobs, 2 relationships, or 2 places to live. Your mind imagines each outcome. It builds detailed emotional simulations of each path. Even if you make one choice and move on, the simulations do not disappear. The brain keeps them stored as potential patterns. Later, when a moment resembles something from an unrealized path, the recognition can feel like memory from another timeline. You are experiencing the overlap between who you are and who you could have been. The phrase, "a message from a self you haven't met yet," is a way of describing the mind interacting with its own future possibilities. The déjà vu does not need to come from outside the self. It comes from how the brain organizes time internally. The mind does not experience time as a straight line. It experiences time as patterns of expectation and outcome. When expectation and reality align with emotional precision, the moment feels remembered. The memory comes from the mind's rehearsal of life, not from its history. The ghost in the moment is the trace of who you are becoming. The familiarity is the signal that experience is meeting a pattern the mind had already shaped. You are stepping into a moment your brain had already considered. You are meeting a version of yourself that was waiting for you. You meet someone for the first time, and something in you responds before words are exchanged. You feel drawn in, a way you cannot explain. You know the shape of their presence. You know the tone they will speak in before they speak. You feel the ease of familiarity, even though you have no shared history. It does not feel imagined, it feels remembered. This is the familiar stranger, a person who feels known before they are known. The mind builds recognition through patterns. You learn how people move, how they speak, how they react. You absorb thousands of small cues from the body language and tone of others. Most of these details never enter conscious awareness, yet the brain stores them. When you meet someone whose expressions, posture, or rhythm match patterns you have seen before, the brain signals familiarity. The feeling arrives first. Explanation comes later, if at all. Imagine hearing laughter in a cafe. A stranger at a nearby table laughs in a way that feels like someone you once loved. The breath at the start of the laugh, the pitch, the release of sound. Your brain registers the pattern and links it to memory. You do not remember the original moment. You only feel the recognition. The familiarity does not come from the person in front of you. It comes from the pattern they match. This pattern matching is not limited to sound. It happens in how someone stands, how they hold their hands, how their eyes move when they think. The mind learns these details to help predict how others will behave. The brain seeks continuity. When a stranger fits a familiar structure, even partially, the brain signals that you have seen them before. The recognition often feels emotional because memory and emotion share deep neural pathways. There is also the role of projection. When you meet someone new, your mind builds an internal model of who they are. It uses what you already know to fill in the gaps. If you have known someone who brought comfort, and the stranger carries a similar calm presence, your mind may assign that same comfort to them. The feeling arrives with no conscious reasoning. You only feel that being near them is easy. Sometimes the familiar stranger mirrors a part of yourself that you do not often express. You may see in them a way of being that feels honest to you, even if you do not show it openly. The recognition comes from the alignment between who they appear to be and who you feel you are inside. You are not remembering them. You are recognizing yourself reflected through them. Consider meeting someone who listens without rushing to respond. They hold pauses with ease. They do not need to fill quiet space. If you value quiet, or if you have longed for that type of attention, your mind will respond to them as if you have known them before. The familiarity comes from matching an internal template, not from shared history. Dream memory can also play a role. The brain uses dreams to test emotional scenarios. It builds spaces and relationships that feel real during sleep. Most dreams fade upon waking, but their emotional tones remain. If you meet someone whose presence matches the emotional structure of a dream figure, your mind may signal recognition. You cannot recall the dream itself, but you recall how the person in the dream felt. The stranger becomes familiar through emotional memory, not through event memory. There is another layer in neurobiology. The brain relies on mirror neurons to understand others. These neurons activate when you observe someone doing something, as if you were performing the action yourself. This allows you to read intentions and predict behavior. When your mirror system aligns strongly with someone else's behavior, the interaction feels smooth. You understand them without effort. This can feel like knowing them for a long time, even when the contact is new. Imagine shaking hands with someone who matches your pace of movement. You release the handshake at the same moment. You nod in sync. You breathe at a similar rhythm. The nervous system responds to this coordination. It feels natural. You do not need to work to understand them. The body reads the body. Familiarity forms before words do. Sometimes familiarity comes from cultural cues. People who grew up in similar environments often share small habits: how they react to noise, how they express discomfort, how they show interest or respect. Even if you do not consciously register these cues, your body recognizes them. You feel at ease faster with people who move through the world in ways your body knows. The The familiar stranger can also arise from timing. You may meet someone during a period of change, reflection, or uncertainty. The mind is more open during these times. You are more sensitive to connection. When you encounter someone who aligns with who you are becoming, not who you have been, the recognition can feel strong. You are meeting someone who fits a future version of yourself. The familiarity comes from the path you are already on. Imagine someone who speaks in a way that opens a new part of your thinking. They use language that feels precise to something you have been trying to understand. The familiarity comes from the direction you are moving, not from your past. They feel like someone you have been waiting to meet because they align with your next step. There are also times when a familiar stranger brings discomfort instead of ease. You may feel cautious around someone for reasons you cannot name. Your brain is drawing from past experiences of subtle harm, disappointment, or tension. The familiarity is a warning, not a welcome. This is the same pattern recognition system working to protect you. The familiar stranger is not a psychic event. It is the mind recognizing patterns, emotional imprints, and internal maps of identity. You are not remembering the person. You are recognizing something in them that already exists in you. You are meeting an internal pattern made visible. You can miss a place you have never seen. The feeling can appear without warning. A photograph, a line of music, or the sound of footsteps on stone can create a longing that feels older than your life. The body reacts before the mind explains. Your chest grows tight. Your attention settles. You feel a quiet pull towards somewhere that does not belong to your personal past. This is misplaced nostalgia, longing for a place, a moment, or a life you never lived. Nostalgia is usually described as a memory emotion. You remember a time from your past and feel warmth, sadness, comfort, or loss. But misplaced nostalgia does not work this way. There is no memory attached. The feeling arrives on its own, without a story. You cannot trace it to a moment you lived. You only know that something in you wants to go back to somewhere you have never been. The mind forms emotional memory the same way it forms sensory memory. You learn the shape of comfort, safety, belonging, and peace from your earliest environment. These emotional shapes form templates. Later in life, when you encounter something that matches one of these templates, the brain signals familiarity. The familiarity can feel like memory, even when it has no past event behind it. Imagine hearing the distant sound of a train late at night. You have never lived near tracks. You have no stories connected to trains, but the sound evokes something calm in you. It feels like home. The memory is not of a place. It is of a feeling your mind recognizes. The train sound matches the emotional tone of being carried or rocked as a child. The nostalgia is real. The source is not literal. Another example, you see a photograph of an empty street in a town you have never visited. The cobblestones are worn. A cafe table sits outside. The light is soft. Something inside you responds. You feel you know this place. You feel that if you walked down the street, your steps would fall into rhythm. You would know where to turn. You would know which doorway to lean against. But there is no memory attached. The longing comes from the structure of the scene, not its geography. The brain builds internal landscapes from fragments of real moments. A childhood bedroom, a quiet hallway, a backyard under summer heat. These fragments become the architecture of safety in the mind. When the world outside resembles one of these internal landscapes, even in small ways, the brain signals home. but the conscious mind cannot find a matching memory, so the feeling becomes mysterious. Misplaced nostalgia can also come from stories. Books, films, and songs can create emotional environments. You can learn the emotional shape of a place you have never visited. If you listen to songs from a certain city or era, your mind can build a map of how that world feels. You may develop longing for a street corner described in a poem, or a coastline shown in a film. The longing is not about the place itself. It is about the emotional state the place represents. Consider someone who grows up in a crowded area with constant noise. They read stories set in small coastal towns where the pace is slow. Over time, their mind builds a sense of peace attached to ocean light and open space. If they later see an image of such a town, they may feel deep longing, not for the town itself, but for the emotional space they imagine within it. Dreams also contribute. The brain creates places during sleep that feel real. You may wake with a clear memory of a city that does not exist in waking life. The buildings are detailed, the streets are familiar. You may return to that dream city many times over the years. It becomes part of your sense of place, even though it has no location on a map. Later, when you encounter a real place that resembles the dream, the nostalgia returns. The dream becomes the missing origin. Culture has a role too. People inherit emotional associations from their families. Stories told at the dinner table, music played in the background, images in old photo albums. You may feel longing for a country your grandparents lived in, even if you have never been there. The longing comes from the emotional weight of the stories, not from direct memory. Sometimes the longing is tied to identity. You may feel drawn to a landscape that reflects a part of you that has not yet been expressed. A quiet forest may feel familiar if you have lived in constant noise but crave silence. A busy city street may feel familiar if you have lived in isolation but crave connection. The nostalgia signals who you feel you could be, not who you have been. Imagine someone who has spent their life in a flat, open region. They see mountains for the first time, not in person, but in a photograph. The feeling is immediate. They feel they know the air. They feel they know the light. They imagine the sound of wind passing through narrow spaces. The mountains represent something that has not yet been lived, a sense of scale, perspective, or challenge. The nostalgia is not for the mountains themselves. It is for the part of themselves that responds to them. Misplaced nostalgia can also arise in moments of transition. When your life changes, your mind seeks stability. Nostalgia offers it. The brain reaches into any emotional memory shape it can find. If no literal memory fits, the brain pulls from imagined or dream-built landscapes. The longing becomes a way to anchor yourself while you move from one version of life to another. The longing is real. The place does not need to exist in your past for the feeling to matter. The emotional template is enough. The brain remembers states of being more easily than it remembers dates and coordinates. When the world presents something that matches the internal state you miss or desire, the nostalgia arrives. It may feel like you are remembering another life. It may feel like you are returning to something unfinished. But the experience does not require mystery to hold meaning. Longing can arise from the shapes of memory, emotion, imagination, and identity. The place you have never stood is not distant. It exists within the architecture of your mind. A thought can appear and feel old the moment it arrives. You might be sitting in a quiet room or walking to the store or washing dishes when a sentence forms in your mind. It has weight. It feels familiar, as if you have said it before or heard it before, even though you cannot find any memory attached to it. The thought feels lived, it feels remembered, yet this is the first time it has appeared in your awareness. It arrives like something pulled from a draft folder you did not know your mind kept. This happens because the brain does not create thoughts in real time. Much of thinking takes place before you become aware of it. The brain works in layers. There is the conscious layer, the part you notice and narrate. Beneath that is the preconscious layer, where information is processed and shaped before reaching awareness. And below that is the unconscious, where patterns, impressions, and emotional associations form and shift without language. Most thoughts start in these lower layers. By the time they reach awareness, they have already developed structure. Think of it like writing a sentence. You may believe you are coming up with the words as you speak or type, but the brain predicts and assembles them before you express them. The conscious mind receives the finished phrase, not the construction process. When a thought feels old the moment it arrives, it may be because the idea has been forming for a long time beneath awareness. It has lived in pieces, shaped by memory, emotion, and pattern, before coming into language. Imagine you have been struggling with a decision. The choice is not clear. You think about it in passing, but you do not sit down to analyze it. Days pass. Then, while stirring tea or taking a shower, a sentence appears. I am ready to leave. Or, this situation has already ended. Or, I need to rest. The thought feels old. It feels like something you have known for weeks. But this is the first time you have spoken it inside your mind. The brain has been processing the situation quietly, testing different interpretations, running emotional simulations. When the conclusion forms clearly enough, it surfaces. It does not feel new because the work was already done below awareness. This also happens with language that feels poetic or reflective. A line may appear that feels like something written long ago. I know this winter, or I have stood here before, or there is a turning in me. You know you did not consciously craft it, yet it feels like it has been waiting. This can come from the way the brain absorbs phrasing from the world. Every conversation, book, song, or observation leaves traces. The mind often recombines these traces into new structures. When the shape of the thought matches familiar emotional patterns, it feels old. Dreams play a role too. Dream imagery does not always translate into memory, but the emotional tone does. A thought may carry the tone of a dream you forgot. You feel the familiarity without knowing the source. The brain's draft folder contains emotional echoes from dream states, stored without dates, names, or narrative. Consider sitting on a train, watching scenery pass. Your mind wanders. A thought appears. This is the part where I return. The thought feels like a memory. You look for the origin, but there is none. The familiarity may come from past travel, from films you have seen, from stories you have absorbed, from moments of transition in your life that carry similar emotional weight. The brain is matching patterns rather than retrieving events. The sense of age in a new thought can also arise from repetition without awareness. The mind can return to the same idea many times before it becomes conscious. You might think about something in fragments, a feeling one day, a phrase another day, a visual image at another time. The pieces gather. When they combine, the final thought feels complete. It feels like something you have been holding for a while because the components have been present all along. Sometimes this happens during grief or change. The mind works to reorganize the understanding of your life. You may be living through a loss or a shift in identity. Thoughts surface that feel like they come from a deeper layer. I am different now, or something has ended in me, or "I cannot return to how I was." These thoughts do not feel new because the emotional shift has already taken place. The language is catching up to the experience. There are times when a thought feels old because it belongs to a pattern you have visited many times. If you have a recurring emotional theme, fear of being forgotten, desire for connection, struggle with belonging, the mind revisits these themes. When life presents similar conditions, the thoughts that arise may sound familiar because they come from the same emotional structure. The content is new, but the emotional architecture is not. Picture standing in a crowd where you feel separate from the people around you. A thought appears, "I am outside of this." You may have had this thought in other times and places. The emotion is the same. The thought feels old because the experience of separation is familiar. The mind is referencing an emotional pattern, not a specific memory. The brain's draft folder also contains ideas shaped by culture. You may carry phrases or imagery that feel like they belong to collective experience. For example, the idea of returning home exists in many stories, even for people who have never left home. When a situation triggers that theme, the mind generates thoughts that feel ancient, shared, or inherited. There is also a practical explanation rooted in cognitive processing. The brain filters sensory and emotional data before presenting it to conscious awareness. It suppresses most information to avoid overload. When suppressed information becomes relevant, the brain releases it. The release can feel like memory because the data has been stored, not created in the moment. The thought arrives fully formed. It feels complete. It feels familiar, as though it has been waiting. In many ways, it has. The mind holds drafts of understanding long before the conscious self knows what it knows. You are sitting in a room or walking down a familiar street or speaking in the middle of an ordinary day, and suddenly the moment feels like a replay. The air, the sound, the position of your body, everything matches something you cannot name. It is not a memory you can point to. You cannot say when this happened before. Yet the moment feels like it has returned. Reality seems to hit playback without your consent. The scene is not repeated in the external world. The repetition happens in the mind. This experience is often called déjà vu, but the term is only a label. It does not explain the feeling of the moment folding in on itself. When it happens, it feels as though the present is doubled. One layer is the moment you are living. The other is a faint echo of the same moment, stored somewhere inside you, but without a clear origin. The two layers align for a few seconds, then separate, and the world continues as before. The brain does not experience time the way clocks record it. Time inside the mind is not linear. It is made of patterns. When you encounter a pattern that matches something stored in your memory system, the brain signals familiarity. Most of the time, this recognition is small and unremarkable. You know how to move through a doorway or how to greet a neighbor because you have done it many times. But sometimes the pattern match involves more than action. It involves light, tone, sound, emotional posture, and rhythm. When several of these align, the brain gives a strong signal that says, "This has happened before." Imagine you are sitting at a kitchen table. A friend says a sentence. The sunlight in the room falls at a particular angle. The texture of the table under your hand is rough. A car passes outside with a certain sound. None of these details alone mean anything, but the combination matches an internal pattern. The brain reads the moment as familiar. The familiarity arrives faster than you can process it. By the time you try to recall where the memory came from, the feeling has already begun to fade. Sometimes the repetition involves dreams. Dreams create detailed environments that feel real when you experience them. Most dreams are forgotten, but the emotional and sensory patterns remain. If the waking world contains a moment that resembles one of these dream patterns, the brain responds with familiarity. The memory is not of a real event. It is of a dream that carried a similar emotional tone. The repetition feels like playback because the dream created a version of the moment that the waking mind now matches. Consider a dream in which you were standing at a window during a storm. You may forget the dream entirely. Months later, you find yourself standing at a window during a real storm. The posture, the sound of rain, and the tone of your internal state match the dream. The brain recognizes the pattern, but the conscious mind cannot locate the source. The recognition feels like repetition without memory. Repetition in the now can also come from the way the brain stores information before you become aware of it. The brain processes sensory data in layers. Sometimes the brain briefly registers a moment, but your conscious awareness does not notice it. Later, when awareness catches up, the brain retrieves the stored information and presents it as memory. The moment feels repeated because you are experiencing it for the second time, once outside awareness and once within it. The first experience is so fast you do not recall it consciously. The second experience feels like replay. Imagine being in a conversation where your mind drifts for half a second. The person continues speaking, but your awareness lags. When you refocus, the words they speak sound familiar. You feel they said them before, even though this is the first time you are consciously hearing them. The brain processed the sound before awareness fully engaged. The delay creates the effect of repetition. Another layer appears when the brain tries to anticipate the near future. The brain makes predictions about what will happen next to help you respond quickly. This predictive processing can run ahead of the present moment. If the prediction is accurate, the brain may register the experience as already known. The result feels like living a moment twice, once in prediction and once in real time. The prediction and the actual moment overlap, and the overlap is experienced as replay. Picture yourself reaching for a glass. The brain predicts the movement, the weight of the glass, and the sound it will make on the table. When the action unfolds exactly as predicted, the brain's recognition system fires. The brain says, "I already experienced this. This is not a mistake. It is a sign of efficient processing." But it feels strange because awareness enters after the prediction has already formed. Repetition in the now can also come from emotional memory. If the emotional tone of a moment matches a past state, the brain may treat the moment as familiar, even if the events differ. For example, if you once felt a deep sense of quiet while sitting outdoors in the evening, and you experience a similar quiet years later in a new place, the brain responds as though you have returned to something. The moment feels repeated because the emotional pattern matches. The landscape may be different, but the internal state is the same. There are times when repetition feels unsettling. The moment feels too precise to be coincidence. The rhythm of gestures, the exact phrasing, the angle of the light, the way time seems to slow, everything feels arranged. This sensation can create the impression of looping, as though time is not moving forward, but folding back onto itself. But the repetition exists in perception, not in the external world. The brain has recognized a complete pattern match, and for a moment, reality feels like a playback clip. Repetition in the now is not a glitch. It is a signal that the brain organizes life through patterns rather than linear memory. The present can feel like the past, not because the past is returning, but because the mind recognizes familiar shapes in the unfolding moment. The replay happens inside, where memory, prediction, and sensation overlap. The present moment becomes layered, and you feel yourself stepping through something you have already lived, even if you never have. A memory can feel like it rises on its own without being summoned. You may not be trying to recall anything. You may be in the middle of routine tasks, folding laundry, waiting for water to boil, walking across a parking lot, when an image or sentence or sensation appears. You did not go looking for it. Yet there it is, vivid and intact. It feels like the memory chose the moment, not you. It enters your awareness with a certain authority, as if it has been waiting for its time to return. The memory seems to remember you. This happens because memory is not stored as a single piece of information. The brain breaks memory into components: visual detail, physical sensation, emotional tone, and meaning. These components live in different regions of the brain. They are linked by networks that strengthen or weaken over time. When you remember something, the brain does not retrieve a perfect recording. It reconstructs the memory from these pieces. Sometimes the pieces come together on their own, without your intention. When that happens, it can feel as if the memory is calling you. The brain forms associative networks. One experience links to another through similarity, emotion, or repetition. If you once stood near a river while feeling at peace, that memory will link to other experiences of peace. Later, if you find yourself in a quiet setting where you feel the same type of calm, the river memory may surface. The trigger is not the location itself. It is the emotional match. The memory returns because the present moment resembles the internal state of the past one. This can happen with light, sound, texture, or even temperature. The brain stores context in ways you do not consciously notice. You may touch a surface that feels warm and slightly rough. Without thinking, a childhood moment returns. Your hand on a sunny wooden door years ago. You were not searching for that memory. The tactile sensation matched the stored pattern. The memory recognized the moment before you recognized the memory. Consider how smell works. The olfactory system has direct pathways to the amygdala and hippocampus, the regions involved in emotion and memory. A smell can summon a memory with strong clarity. Fresh bread may bring back your grandmother's kitchen. Wet pavement may recall summer storms from your childhood. These memories often arrive fully formed. You do not choose them. They emerge because the present sensory input activated the memory's network. Sometimes a memory returns because the emotional tone of your life has shifted. The brain revisits old memories when they help you interpret your current state. If you are going through loss, the brain may pull forward memories of previous endings. If you are experiencing new connection, it may bring back memories of closeness. The memory functions like a tool. It returns to offer context. It chooses you in the moment that resembles the conditions in which it was formed. Imagine sitting on a bus after a difficult conversation. You look out the window, and a memory from years earlier surfaces, standing on a balcony in the early evening, trying to understand something that felt too large to face. The details match. The feeling of searching for clarity, the sense of waiting for time to give you an answer. The memory is not random. The brain recognized the emotional landscape and brought forward another moment where you felt the same. The memory arrived to help you interpret now. There are also memories that return because they were not fully processed when they occurred. When an experience is overwhelming or confusing, the brain may store fragments without forming a full narrative. Later, when you encounter something that helps complete the narrative, an idea, a conversation, a sentence, the memory reappears. It seeks integration. It returns to be understood in a way it could not be understood when it first formed. Picture someone who experienced loss at a young age. At that time, the emotional understanding was limited. The memory stored as confusion, or silence, or a small detail, the sound of a closing door, the smell of winter air. Years later, while sitting in a cafe, they overhear a conversation about saying goodbye. The old memory rises, not because they chose to remember, but because the present moment it provided the missing piece. The memory remembered them because it was waiting for meaning. The same process can apply to joyful memories. You may hear a song from a time when you felt free. The memory of that period returns with color and depth. You feel the same breath in your chest, the same looseness in your body. The memory is not neutral. It carries the emotional posture of the original moment. It returns to remind you that the emotional state is still possible. The memory recognizes the conditions under which you could return to that state again. The idea that a memory can choose is not literal. The memory does not have awareness, but the brain has mechanisms that prioritize certain stored experiences. Memories tied to strong emotion or identity have lower thresholds for activation. They surface more easily. These memories function as reference points. They help define who you understand yourself to be. When the present moment challenges or confirms those definitions, the memory appears. Consider the moment when you suddenly remember the feeling of being a child, standing in a doorway, looking out at the world with curiosity and no sense of time. You may not have thought about that moment in years, but perhaps today you feel overwhelmed or tired. The memory returns because it holds a state of openness or simplicity that you have lost track of. The memory offers a model of another way of being. It remembers you not as you are now, but as you were then. There are also memories that linger just below awareness. You sense them more than see them. They form part of the background of your identity. When one of these memories rises into full consciousness, it can feel like recognition rather than recall. You are not remembering the memory. The memory is remembering you. It brings with it the version of you that existed when the memory was formed. This is why some memories feel like they contain your voice speaking back to you. The memory does not only show what happened, it shows who you were. When it returns, it brings that version of you with it. The recollection is not only the event, it is the self that lived it. The memory chooses the moment when that earlier self has something to say to the current one. You can carry a memory that does not belong to your own life. You might feel affection for a house you never lived in, or sorrow for an event that did not happen to you, or nostalgia for a decade you never saw. The feeling is real, but the history behind it is not personal. This is borrowed history. It forms quietly through the stories, places, emotions, and cultural memories that surround you. The mind absorbs more than your direct experience. It builds identity from impressions, and sometimes those impressions settle into the shape of memory. Stories passed down through family are often the source. A grandmother might describe her childhood home, the smell of bread in the kitchen, the way the porch boards creaked, the rhythm of people moving through the house. You hear the story many times. The details settle in your mind. Later, when you think about that house, you may see it in your imagination with clarity. You may even feel you have been there. But the image is constructed from language, tone, and emotional pattern, not first-hand memory. You didn't live in that house, yet the house feels like part of your past. If a family repeats certain stories with strong emotional tone, the brain stores the emotional shape along with the narrative details. Over time, the distinction between hearing the story and being part of it can soften. The brain uses the same neural systems to imagine and to recall. When a story is vivid enough, imagining can feel like remembering. There is also borrowed history that comes from collective experience. Wars, migrations, cultural movements, and shared events shape the emotional atmosphere of families and communities. You may grow up hearing how your family struggled to start over in a new place, or how someone lost everything and had to rebuild. Even if you did not live through the struggle, you may carry the emotional posture of it. You may feel cautious with resources, or value stability, or feel a sense of alertness without clear reason. The emotional memory is inherited through tone and behavior, not event. Consider someone whose grandparents lived through a period of scarcity. They grew up hearing, "Don't waste, be careful, prepare for uncertainty." They never went hungry. But the fear of hunger lives in the family's emotional language. Years later, they may feel anxious in grocery stores or have difficulty throwing things away. The emotional memory is real, but the history behind it is borrowed. The body reacts as though the experience happened to them, even though it did not. Borrowed histories can come from the media we consume. A film about a small town may create a sense of belonging to that town. A novel about a distant city may give you a vivid feeling of having walked its streets. You may feel affection or longing for a time period you only know through stories. The brain forms memory structures out of narrative detail, even when the events are fictional. Imagination uses the same neural pathways as recall. The difference lies in the source, not in the sensory feel. Dreams play a role too. A dream can create a place or relationship with emotional weight. You may wake with a sense that you have lived in a certain city or known a certain person, even though they do not exist in waking life. Later, when you encounter something that resembles the dream, an accent, a street layout, a color of sky, the feeling of recognition returns. The memory feels personal, but its origin is internal, not historical. Borrowed histories also appear in the way we understand our identity. People often construct a sense of self around narratives that feel meaningful. You may feel drawn to a culture, a landscape, or a time period because it aligns with an internal sense of self. The history feels like yours because it resonates with your emotional patterns. This does not mean the memory is false. It means the memory is emotional rather than experiential. Imagine someone who feels connected to the ocean but grew up far inland. They may feel calm near water. They may have dreams of waves or coastlines. They may feel a deep familiarity with the sound of tides, even though they have spent little time near the sea. The memory is of a desired state, not a lived experience. The longing itself forms the memory. Borrowed histories can also come from relationships. When you spend time with someone, you absorb parts of their past. If they describe a childhood vacation spot enough times, you may begin to picture it as if you were there. If they talk about a loss that shaped them, you may feel the weight of that loss yourself. Memory networks can merge through emotional closeness. The distinction between your story and their story becomes thin. There are cases where borrowed memory feels like identity rather than imagination. For example, someone may feel a deep connection to the struggles of a certain group, even if they did not personally experience those struggles. They may feel grief or anger when thinking about historical oppression or inherited trauma. This can happen because empathy allows the brain to simulate another person's experience. The simulation can be strong enough to feel like memory. The brain does not require first-hand experience to form emotional memory. It only requires emotional resonance. When a story matches something inside you, the story can feel like your own. Borrowed histories also appear when someone tries to understand themselves. A person may search for where a certain longing or fear originated. If they cannot find the origin within their own life, they may attach it to a story that seems to explain it. The narrative offers structure. It becomes a container for the feeling. Over time, the container feels like memory. Think of someone who has always felt a sense of displacement. Quiet belief that they do not fully belong where they are. They may encounter a story of migration or exile and feel an immediate connection. The story offers language for the feeling. They may adopt the emotional memory of displacement, even if their own life did not involve moving from one place to another. The narrative fits the internal condition, so the mind stores it as part of the self. Borrowed histories can be gentle or heavy. They can offer comfort, meaning, belonging, or burden. They reveal how identity is shaped, not only by what happens to you, but by what your mind absorbs from the world around you. They show that memory is not just a record of the past. It is also a network of emotional patterns that connect you to the larger human story. A dream can follow you into the morning without asking permission. You wake and begin to move through your day, but something feels slightly altered. A place, a face, or a sentence lingers. You cannot say if you dreamed it last night or if it comes from somewhere older. The dream feels real as any memory with a location in time. Yet there is no date, no story to attach it to. The moment exists without placement. It feels lived, but it was never lived. The dream pretends to be real. The brain does not distinguish sharply between memories formed while awake and images formed during sleep. The same networks that store experience also create dream scenes. The difference lies in the level of sensory input. When awake, the brain responds to the world outside. When asleep, the brain draws from its own stored material. Fragments of places, sounds, emotions, and faces. These fragments combine into new forms. Dreams borrow from memory, but they do not follow rules of time or logic. When a dream carries strong emotional tone, the brain can store it as though it were a lived event. You may dream of walking through a house that feels familiar. You know where the doors lead. You know how the floor sounds beneath your feet. You feel a sense of belonging. Yet this house does not exist in your waking life. When you wake, the memory of the house remains, not clear like a photograph, but stable in feeling. Later, when you enter a real building that has similar lighting or space, the recognition returns. You feel you have entered the dream house. The dream steps into the daylight and takes the place of memory. Consider a dream where you speak with someone you have never met. The conversation feels honest. The connection feels deep. You wake with the sense of being understood. The person's face may be unclear, but their presence remains. When you later meet someone whose tone or posture resembles the dream figure, your mind signals familiarity. You sense that you have known them before, but the memory is internal. The dream created a relationship without a counterpart in waking life. Dreams can also reshape real memories. A dream may place you in a childhood setting with people who were not present in the original moment, or the emotional tone of the event may shift. You may remember the past as peaceful, though it was not, or as frightening, though it carried no threat. When the dream version feels more emotionally coherent than the real event, the dream can override the original memory. The result is a memory that feels true, but emerged in sleep. Sometimes a dream completes something unfinished. If you parted from someone without closure, a dream may bring them back. You may speak the words you could not speak then. The emotional release can feel real. The body responds. The breathing changes. You wake with a sense that a conversation happened. The memory is not factual, but it is meaningful. It fills a gap the waking mind did not know how to address. The dream pretends to be real because it resolves something that the daylight could not. The brain can store dreams especially strongly when the dream involves movement or physical sensation. Running, falling, holding, touching. These sensations involve motor cortex activation. The body reacts, muscles tense, heart rate changes. When these sensations are encoded, they integrate with the memory system. You may remember the sensation of standing on a cliff more than the visual details of the dream. When you later stand in a high place, the memory returns, not as fear or recall, but as recognition. The dream has attached itself to real sensation. Some dreams repeat. They may return across years in slightly shifting forms. A hallway you revisit. A person who changes faces but carries the same presence. A train station where you wait for a train that never arrives. These recurring dream spaces can feel more stable than some waking locations. The mind treats them almost like internal landmarks. When a recurring dream appears again, you do not feel surprised. You feel as if you are returning. The dream location holds continuity your waking life may not. In some cases, a dream slips into daytime memory because it mimics a narrative structure. The brain is drawn to cause, effect, and emotional resolution. A dream that follows a simple story arc is easier to store. You may remember it as if you watched a scene rather than dreamed one. Later, when you try to recall how you know a certain place or moment, you may confuse the dream memory with life memory. The edges blur because the mind does not tag dreams with the same markers it uses for waking experience. There are also dreams that carry no imagery. They express themselves as mood. You wake feeling heavy or light or unsettled. The mood persists, but you cannot explain it. A small moment during the day may bring the dream back into focus. A color, a tone of voice, a gesture. Suddenly, the feeling has shape again. You did not forget the dream. You stored it as emotion rather than narrative. The memory was waiting for context. Sometimes dreams step into waking life when you do not want them to. For example, dreams involving unresolved loss can return again and again. The dream may show fragments of an event or a person who has been gone for years. Waking, you may not dwell on the loss, but the dream keeps bringing it forward. The memory pretends to be real because the emotional process is still active. The dream serves as a container for what has not yet been processed. The boundary between dreaming and waking is not firm. The brain is the same organ in both states. The difference lies in where attention is directed. When attention shifts inward, the mind uses memory, imagination, and emotional patterns to build worlds. When attention shifts outward, the mind uses sensory input to build the world. Both are constructed. Both can feel real. When dream material enters the waking state, it chooses moments where the emotional landscape matches. The dream steps into the now because something in the present echoes the tone of the night. A moment arrives and feels familiar before you can explain why. You might be sitting in a cafe, or standing in a doorway, or listening to someone speak. Something inside you lights up with certainty. You know this. You have been here. You can almost predict what comes next. The feeling is brief, and then it fades, leaving a soft echo or a slight confusion. Many people describe this as déjà vu. It feels meaningful, like a message or a sign. It can feel like you have stepped into a memory from another life or a timeline looping back on itself. But the experience does not require anything mystical. It can be understood through how the brain processes information. The brain works with signals, patterns, and timing. Neurons communicate through electrical and chemical activity. These signals travel across synapses, linking one cell to another. When you learn, recall, imagine, or notice something, these signals activate networks that represent the experience. Recognition happens when a pattern of activity matches a pattern already stored in memory. Usually, this happens in a way that feels clear. You remember someone's face because you met them before. You remember how to drive because you have practiced. But déjà vu occurs when the recognition signal fires without a matching memory. The brain says, "I know this," but the timeline offers no explanation. One theory involves neural timing. When information enters the brain, it moves through different pathways. Normally, these pathways sync. You experience something once, but if one pathway fires slightly before another, the brain may register the moment twice. The first registration is too fast to reach awareness. The second reaches consciousness. You feel the moment as repetition because the recognition has already been processed. You are experiencing the same input twice, almost at the same time. The brain reads the second version as memory. Imagine walking into a room and hearing someone laugh. Your brain receives the sensory information and begins to interpret it. If one region of the brain processes the sound a fraction of a second earlier than another, the second processing can feel like recall. You experience it as déjà vu. Nothing supernatural occurred. The brain simply ran the same pattern twice. Another explanation involves pattern-based memory. The brain stores memories in fragments. It does not keep a complete picture of an event. Instead, it keeps pieces: tone, light, posture, emotional state. When the present moment contains fragments that resemble stored patterns, the brain signals recognition. If the fragments match strongly enough, the moment feels like memory, even when it is unfamiliar. Consider sitting on a porch during late afternoon. The angle of light, the temperature of the air, and the smell of nearby plants may resemble a moment from childhood. You do not recall the childhood moment directly, but the sensory match is strong. The brain fires the recognition signal. The present scene feels like a replay. The memory system has activated without a clear narrative to attach to it. Dream memory can also trigger déjà vu. Dreams use stored fragments of experience to build new scenes. When a waking moment matches the emotional or sensory pattern of a dream, the brain may treat it as remembered experience. You wake and forget the dream, but the feeling remains. Later, when something in the waking world resembles the dream, the familiarity returns. It feels like prophecy, but it is memory of a memory without clear origin. Picture a dream in which you walk down a hallway under soft, warm light. You forget the dream the next morning. Weeks later, you walk into a real hallway with similar light. The sensation arrives. You have been here. The memory comes from the dream. The brain recognizes the pattern, even without recalling the dream itself. Some people experience déjà vu more often when tired or under stress. When the brain is managing many inputs at once, its predictive systems work harder. The brain tries to guess what will happen next. If the guess matches the actual moment, the brain may register the experience as something already known. The prediction and the event overlap. The overlap feels like memory. There is also the emotional layer. The brain attaches stronger memory weight to moments with emotional significance. Even mild emotion, like curiosity or hesitation, can strengthen memory traces. When déjà vu feels meaningful, it may be because the brain is responding to emotional pattern, not factual recall. The moment feels loaded because the brain has marked it with attention. Imagine hearing someone speak in a gentle tone during a difficult time in your life. Years later, someone with a similar tone may trigger a sense of familiarity. The words are new, the person is new, but the emotional posture matches. The brain lights up the same network. It reads the moment as repetition. This can feel like foresight or intuition. You might think you knew what would happen because it was destined, but the prediction came from the brain's constant work of matching patterns. When the match is precise, recognition feels like memory, and memory feels like prophecy. The experience is real. The interpretation is where meaning shifts. The brain recognizes itself. Synapses fire in patterns that echo previous patterns. The sensation of déjà vu is the mind noticing its own structure. The moment feels like return, but it is the present, revealing how the brain organizes time. There are memories that feel complete even though they have no place in your life. You may recall walking down a street you have never visited. You may picture a conversation that never took place. You may see a room in your mind with clear light, furniture, and sound. Yet the room does not exist. The memory appears to belong to you, but you cannot trace where it came from. It feels like something you experienced, but your history cannot account for it. The mind keeps a quiet museum of imagined events. The brain does not store memories as full recordings. It stores fragments. A scent here, a texture there, a tone of voice, a color of light, a posture, a feeling. These pieces are stored in different parts of the brain. When the mind tries to recall an experience, it reconstructs the memory from these fragments. Most of the time, reconstruction works well enough. You recognize the memory as yours, shaped by your life. But sometimes the brain combines fragments that never belong together. It links a doorway from one moment to a street from a film, and attaches the emotional tone of a childhood friendship. The result is a memory that feels real, but does not come from lived experience. For example, imagine remembering sitting in a kitchen with green tiles and warm afternoon sunlight. You can picture the pattern of the tiles. You can feel the warmth of the light. You can sense the quiet around you. But when you try to place the memory in your actual life, nothing matches. You never lived in a home with green tiles. The scene is built from pieces: a kitchen you saw on television, a moment of warmth from your grandmother's house, and the quiet of a late afternoon years later. The brain combined them into a single memory. The museum displays this room as if you once stood inside it. This happens because the mind tries to create continuity. It prefers complete stories over scattered fragments. When the elements of memory are available but the narrative is not, the mind sometimes fills in the gaps. The result is not a lie. It is an attempt to create coherence in your sense of self and past. Some imagined memories come from dreams. Dreams use the same neural systems that store real experiences. A dream may feel vivid and coherent while it happens. When you wake, most of the details fade quickly, but a piece may remain: a hallway, a face, a gesture. Later, when your mind searches for the origin of that image, it cannot distinguish whether it came from waking life or sleep. Dreams make excellent exhibits in the museum because they borrow emotional reality, even if they do not match physical reality. Imagine dreaming of sitting at a train station, waiting for someone. You remember the echoes of footsteps. You remember the feeling of anticipation. You wake and continue with your day. Months later, while sitting in a cafe, the atmosphere matches the emotional tone of the dream. The dream memory rises. It feels like a place you once sat in real life. The memory has no date, no season, no context, only feeling. The mind places it in the museum of your past. Stories passed to you by others can also become part of your internal museum. If you have heard a story many times, especially one told with emotion or detail, the brain may begin to store it like a memory. You may picture it as if you were there. This is common in families. Grandparents describe places that shaped them. Parents describe events from their youth. Over time, the emotional tone of these retellings becomes familiar. You may remember the story as if you were present, even though you were not. Consider someone who grows up hearing about a family home that burned down before they were born. They hear the details of the night, the smell of smoke, the sound of voices outside. They may come to picture the scene. The memory feels internal, but the event did not belong to their timeline. It is stored because the emotional weight made it feel significant. The museum displays it as something you lived through. The mind is also influenced by the stories you read and the films you watch. When you immerse yourself in a narrative, your brain simulates experience. When you imagine yourself in a scene, the brain uses similar neural pathways to those used in actual memory. If the emotional experience is strong, the trace can remain. Later, when you recall it, it may feel personal. You may remember walking through a snowy street in a city you have never visited. You may remember conversations between characters as if you took part in them. The brain remembers emotional involvement, not authorship. There is another layer. Memory is shaped by identity. The stories you believe about yourself influence which fragments the brain chooses to link together. If you see yourself as someone who has endured loss, you may recall or even construct memories that reinforce that identity. If you see yourself as someone who belongs to the ocean, you may form memory-like images of coastlines you have never walked. The museum reflects the person you think you are, as much as the person you have been. This does not mean imagined memories are false in any dismissive sense. They are real in terms of emotion. They shape behavior, beliefs, and self-understanding. The Museum of Imagined Events is part of how the brain creates continuity and meaning. The mind would rather offer you a complete scene than leave you holding an empty space. It fills the gap, not out of deception, but out of the need to create a coherent story of who you are and where you have been. You may be thinking something ordinary when a strange awareness forms behind it. The thought does not feel new. It feels like you have thought it before, in the same tone, in the same posture, in the same silence. The moment feels doubled, not in the dramatic sense of déjà vu, but in a quieter way. The thought feels like a repeat of itself, two identical thoughts separated by time. This can happen during simple tasks. You look at your hand, reaching to turn a doorknob, and the thought appears, I have done this exact motion in this exact mental state. Or you are sitting at a table, listening to someone speak, and a sentence in your mind arrives with the weight of history. The words are familiar, but the moment attached to them is out of reach. You try to locate the earlier instance, but there is no clear memory, only the feeling of repetition. The brain forms thoughts long before you become aware of them. Most cognition happens beneath conscious attention. The mind is always sorting, comparing, and predicting. When a situation resembles a previous situation in emotional tone and sensory pattern, the brain often produces the same internal response. That response can include identical thoughts. The repetition comes from the brain recognizing a pattern and activating the same neural network used before. Imagine you once sat in a quiet room, feeling unsure about your next step in life. You looked out a window and thought, "I am waiting for something I cannot name." The moment passed. Months or years later, you find yourself in a different place, maybe a cafe late in the afternoon. The light is soft. You are unsure again. The same thought returns. I am waiting for something I cannot name. It feels like time folding. But what is folding is the network of neurons that formed that thought in the first place. The emotional pattern matches, so the brain retrieves the same mental response. Emotional memory has strong influence here. Thoughts do not exist in isolation. They arise from emotional context. When your emotional posture matches an earlier posture, the brain can produce the same language or imagery to express it. The repetition does not mean the moment is the same. It means the internal state is similar. The brain reuses familiar phrasing to describe familiar feeling. Consider someone who often feels responsible for others. When they are young, they may think, "I have to hold everything together." Later in life, during stress, the same phrase returns, unchanged. The person may believe the thought is new, but the phrase has been stored with the emotional state. When the emotional state returns, the phrase does too. The brain is efficient. It reuses old patterns. Sometimes the repetition is subtle. You may have a passing thought about how a room feels, or how someone looks at you, or how your breath sits in your chest. These thoughts fade quickly, but if they return later, in a different place or stage of life, the familiarity may surprise you. It can feel like someone else inside you has lived the moment already, but the someone else is simply a previous version of you. Dreams can also create doppelganger thoughts. A dream may present an idea or sentence that you forget on waking. Later, when you think the same sentence while awake, it feels familiar because the memory of the dream persists emotionally, but not narratively. The thought matches the dream's emotional trace. You feel repetition without memory. Imagine dreaming of walking through a market and thinking, "I am not where I thought I would be." The words stay beneath awareness. Weeks later, you are at work and the thought appears. It feels lived. It feels old. The brain stored the sentence in connection with a certain emotional tone. When the tone returns, the thought follows. Sometimes the repetition feels eerie because the gap between the two thoughts is wide. You may remember yourself as a child, looking at the night sky, thinking, "I am small in something endless." Years later, standing outside at night, the same thought arrives. The wording, the rhythm, the emotional weight match. The space between the two moments collapses. The child and the adult overlap. The memory is not spoken as memory. It is spoken as present thought. Language shapes how we understand ourselves, and the mind returns to familiar language when trying to express complex or uncertain states. If you have ever described yourself in a certain way, quiet, lost, searching, the mind may bring that phrasing back whenever the emotional context matches. The repetition can feel like the thought is speaking you rather than the other way around. There are also thoughts shaped by culture or family. Phrases you heard many times growing up can become internal narration. You may not notice them until they reappear in adulthood. The words feel old because they are. Your mind stored them long before you understood them. When your life later reaches a moment where the phrase fits, the thought surfaces. It feels like something remembered, not chosen. The doppelganger effect can make time feel layered instead of linear. It reminds you that who you were and who you are not separate. The brain stores states, and when you enter those states again, the past version of you returns through language. The repetition is not a glitch, it is a trace of continuity. The thought has lived before because you have lived before in a similar way. The moment is new. But the mind recognizes its shape, and the thought steps forward again. Sometimes you speak, think, or feel an answer before the situation that requires it appears. The response arrives first. The moment that seems to cause the response comes second. It can feel like time has shifted slightly, or like your mind has stepped ahead of itself. You may hear yourself saying yes before the question is asked. You may feel sadness before hearing the news. You may know someone is about to call before the phone rings. The echo speaks before the sound that should create it. This experience can feel mysterious, but it has roots in how the brain predicts and prepares. The brain does not wait for the world to act before forming a response. It anticipates. It looks for patterns and cues. It uses memory, emotion, context, and past experience to forecast what is likely to happen next. Most of this prediction happens beneath conscious awareness. By the time a thought or feeling reaches your awareness, the brain has already run through possibilities and settled on one. When the prediction matches reality, the response feels like it came before the stimulus. Imagine sitting in a conversation where the topic shifts toward conflict. The tone of voices changes. Breathing patterns shift. Even before anyone says anything sharp, your body reacts. You feel tension in your shoulders. You prepare an explanation, an apology, or a defense. The conversation has not reached the conflict yet, but the brain recognizes the pattern from past moments that felt the same. It prepares the emotional and verbal response early. The response appears first. The moment that calls for it arrives later. Another example, walking into a place that has a mood similar to one where something once went wrong. The smell of the room or the angle of the light matches the stored memory of that earlier event. The brain brings forward caution, or sadness, or alertness before anything happens. The emotional response comes first. The stimulus comes second. The brain used pattern recognition to anticipate the state before the external situation confirmed it. This predictive system works in small everyday ways too. When someone begins a sentence, you often know how it will end before they finish it. If someone sighs in a particular way, you may feel the need to comfort them before they speak. If a friend pauses before answering, you may already know they are about to say no. These moments feel like intuition, but they come from the brain absorbing thousands of small cues: tone, timing, muscle tension, facial micro-expressions. The brain recognizes the pattern, matches it to memory, and forms the response before conscious thought is involved. There are cases that feel stronger than prediction. You may know someone you care about is upset before they tell you. You may wake in the night with a feeling that something is wrong, and the news arrives later. These moments feel like the response is speaking from a deeper place. The explanation can still come from pattern and memory. The body and mind store emotional connections. If your bond with someone is strong, your nervous system may respond to subtle changes in tone or behavior you did not consciously register. The response appears as a feeling, sudden and clear. The echo can speak first in decision-making as well. You may have an immediate sense of yes or no before you analyze the situation. The brain often forms a conclusion before conscious reasoning begins. The reasoning arrives afterward as explanation, not cause. You may tell yourself that you thought it through, but the decision formed in the pre-conscious layers of processing. The echo came first. The explanation followed. This can happen in quiet moments. You may find yourself thinking, "I need to leave," without knowing why. Or, "I should stay," without being able to say what changed. The thought feels older than the moment. It feels like it has been forming in the background. And it has. The brain has been gathering subtle cues: fatigue, discomfort, lack of alignment, or a sense of welcome. When enough cues accumulate, the thought surfaces. There are emotional states that behave like echoes too. If you once experienced grief in a particular posture or tone of light, that emotional configuration can reappear years later in a different setting. You may feel the grief before knowing what triggered it. The body remembers patterns of emotional expression. When the present moment matches a stored emotional configuration, the feeling returns before the meaning becomes clear. The response precedes the understanding. Even in ordinary conversation, the brain predicts meaning based on rhythm more than words. You may start laughing before the punchline. You may soften your voice before the other person reveals something tender. The brain is already adjusting, already reacting, already answering. To someone experiencing these moments, it can feel like you are remembering the future instead of predicting it. But memory and prediction use the same neural pathways. The brain looks backward to look forward. When the brain recognizes a familiar shape in the unfolding moment, it steps ahead. The echo is not separate from the sound. It is the mind preparing itself for what it already knows how to meet. The response comes first because the brain has seen something like this before. The recognition arrives faster than conscious thought. And by the time the stimulus reaches awareness, you have already answered it. You may remember certain moments in your life with clarity and certainty. Yet when you look closer, something does not align. The image is vivid, but the details shift. The memory feels important, but it may not connect to any verifiable event. The mind places memories like markers, as if laying breadcrumbs to guide you back through the story of who you believe you are. Some of those markers are solid. Some are imagined. Some are rearranged to make the path feel continuous. These are false breadcrumbs, memories shaped less by what happened and more by who you needed to be at the time. The brain does not store memory as a complete recording. It stores traces, sensory fragments, emotional tones, themes. Over time, the mind uses these pieces to construct a narrative. The narrative gives identity its shape. People need a sense of continuity to move through life. You need to believe that the person you are now grew from the person you were then. When the pieces do not line up neatly, the mind sometimes fills in the gaps. Imagine remembering yourself as a shy child who rarely spoke. You may picture yourself sitting quietly in classrooms or watching others play. But years later, someone who knew you then may describe you very differently. They might say you were talkative or bold. The memory you carry may reflect how you came to understand yourself later, not how you acted at the time. The mind placed the breadcrumb to support your current identity. It shaped memory to match the version of yourself you learned to believe. Emotional memory often outweighs factual memory. If you felt lonely during a period of your life, you may remember most events from that time as loneliness, even if many of your days were filled with activity and connection. The feelings become the structure. The brain simplifies complex experiences into emotional categories. The breadcrumb is placed to explain who you are now by pointing toward what you felt then. The specific events become less important than the emotional meaning attached to them. There are also memories formed from stories told about you. A family may repeat a certain story: how you cried at your first day of school, how you refused to eat a certain food, how you were always independent. These stories become reference points. You may remember them as if you lived them with awareness, but often the memory is shaped by the retelling, not by direct recall. The breadcrumb is placed by the group, and you follow it because it fits the shape of the identity you were given. Consider someone who grows up hearing, they were the responsible child. They may remember themselves taking care of siblings, organizing the home, solving problems, but some of those memories may be reconstructed. They may not recall what actually happened, but instead recall the role they learned to fill. The breadcrumb points backward to justify the identity of responsibility they carry now. Memory can also shift to protect the self. If you experienced something painful or confusing, the brain may soften or rearrange the memory. You may remember a conflict as mutual when it was one-sided. You may remember a loss as expected when it was sudden. The breadcrumb here functions like a coping mechanism. It helps you move forward by reducing emotional disruption. The memory is not intentionally false. It is adjusted to maintain stability. There are times when the mind creates a memory of a turning point that did not happen in a single moment. You may believe you changed because of one conversation, one afternoon, one decision. But personal change often happens slowly. The breadcrumb marks one scene to symbolize what actually unfolded over months or years. The symbolic memory becomes more vivid than the real timeline. The brain prefers a clean hinge point rather than a gradual shift. Dreams can contribute to false breadcrumbs as well. A dream may contain a powerful image, you as a child running through a field or sitting beside someone who comforted you. The dream may feel emotionally true. Later, when you search your past for where that feeling came from, the dream memory may blend into life memory. You may believe the event happened because the emotional tone is familiar. The mind does not distinguish between emotional truth and historical accuracy when building identity. Sometimes false breadcrumbs appear because the mind is trying to understand a current emotional state. If you are restless or searching for meaning, the mind may pull forward memories that align with that feeling, even if they were not significant at the time. A small event becomes a symbolic one. A passing comment becomes formative. The memory shifts to explain the present. The breadcrumb appears retroactively. There are also positive, false breadcrumbs. You may remember childhood summers as golden and free, even if they were ordinary. The glow of nostalgia softens edges. The memory is shaped to represent warmth, belonging, or innocence. The mind places these breadcrumbs to preserve something worth keeping. Every identity requires a path. The mind builds that path from real moments, altered moments, imagined moments, dreams, and inherited stories. The false breadcrumb is not a failure of memory. It is a function of the brain trying to give shape to a self that changes over time. The memory is placed not only to recall the past, but to explain the present. The breadcrumb marks where you believe you came from, even if the steps that led you here were more complex than the memory suggests. You may speak a sentence one day and feel as if you have said it before in the same tone and rhythm. The moment feels rehearsed, even though you never practiced it. The words come out smoothly, without effort, as though the line has been waiting. This is not performance. It is the mind drawing from patterns formed long before the moment of speech. You speak a script you did not know you memorized. The brain learns language through repetition. From childhood, you absorb phrases, tones, and conversational structures simply by hearing them. You learn from family, from school, from overheard arguments, from stories and films, from the way people speak around you. These patterns settle in memory in layers. You may not remember each phrase as a quote, but your brain keeps the rhythm and emotional posture. When a situation resembles the emotional shape of a remembered pattern, the brain retrieves matching language. You speak the response automatically. Imagine being in a conversation where someone expresses disappointment. Before you think, you hear yourself say, "It's fine, I understand." The words feel familiar, but not because you chose them. You learned to soothe others long ago. You absorbed that role. The script was memorized in the background of your life. Now the line appears at the exact moment the emotional context matches the stored pattern. This can happen with apologies as well. You may say, "Sorry, I didn't mean to," even when you did nothing wrong. The script was shaped by early dynamics. If you learned that harmony depends on your ability to smooth discomfort, you will use language to maintain it. The words are automatic. They are not chosen in the moment. The brain is recalling a learned response to tension. There are conversational patterns that come from shared social expectations. When someone says, "How are you?" you likely answer with a reflex, not a reflection. But deeper patterns work the same way. When someone reveals something vulnerable, many people respond with reassurance, even if silence would show more care. The reassurance script is familiar. It feels correct because it is widely modeled, but not every response shaped by repetition matches the present moment well. Sometimes the script is internal rather than spoken. You may have a repeated thought that appears in certain emotional environments. When overwhelmed, you may think, "I have to handle this alone." When hopeful, you may think, "This time will be different." The wording stays the same. The thought feels old. It feels like a line practiced and stored. It is. The brain reuses efficient language to describe emotional patterns that repeat. Consider someone who grew up hearing phrases like, "Be strong," "Don't make it worse," or "Keep going." These phrases become internal cues. As an adult, in moments of stress, those exact phrases may rise again. The words feel rehearsed because they were rehearsed, though not consciously. The brain stored them as tools for coping. There are scripts learned from culture as well. Films, stories, and songs teach emotional language. Someone may express longing and hear themselves say something that sounds cinematic. "I don't know what I'm waiting for, but I'm waiting." The phrasing comes from somewhere external, but it matches the internal state. It feels natural in the moment because the emotional pattern is real. The script just provided the words. Dreams can store language that later appears in waking speech. You may dream a conversation without remembering it clearly. Days later, you say something and feel a faint memory behind it. The sentence seems to carry an echo. The mind used dream material to form the language that felt right. You did not decide to use the sentence, it surfaced. The script can appear in relationships. Two people may fall into predictable roles. One explains, one listens. One apologizes, one forgives. One withdraws, one reaches forward. When conflict appears, each person speaks lines learned long before the relationship began. The argument may feel repetitive, even if the topic is new. The emotional structure matches older experiences. The brain returns to the language that fits similar situations. There are moments when the script's automatic nature becomes visible. You may speak a sentence and immediately feel a distance from it, as though you are listening to yourself. The tone may surprise you. The phrasing may feel inherited. You might think, "That sounded like my mother, or my father, or a teacher, or someone I barely remember." The line reveals its origin, even if only for a moment. A script can also arise in moments of stillness. You may be alone, thinking, when a sentence appears fully formed. Something like, "This is where things turn," or "I have been here before in a different way." The sentence feels complete. It feels like part of a longer conversation you have not yet had. The brain often shapes meaning in the background before awareness catches up. When the meaning becomes strong enough, it emerges as language. It feels rehearsed because the emotional processing occurred before the words appeared. Language does not only express thought, it shapes it. The scripts you carry influence how you interpret your life. If your internal script says, "I need to fix things," you will see problems as your responsibility. If your internal script says, "Things work out," you will approach uncertainty with trust. The script influences perception. When a line appears and feels familiar, it can be a signal. It may show a pattern repeating. It may show that an old emotional posture is active again. The script can reveal the self you have been practicing without noticing that you were practicing at all. There are moments when something feels familiar without offering any explanation. You may walk into a building you have never entered before and feel as if you already know the layout. You may hear someone's voice for the first time and feel a quiet recognition in your chest. You may stand in a crowd and sense that you have been in this exact emotional position before, though no memory follows. The familiarity is clear, but it has no context. It does not attach to a place, a person, or a specific event. The clarity arrives alone. The mind works hard to make sense of the world through memory and pattern. Memory helps you understand who you are and how you reached the present moment. Pattern recognition helps you move through the world efficiently without having to analyze every detail. Familiarity without context occurs when the pattern recognition system activates without a corresponding memory trace. The brain signals that you have seen or felt something like this before, but it cannot locate when or where it happened. Imagine being in a city for the first time and turning down a street without knowing why. The street feels right. You know where it leads before you reach the end. When you try to explain this to yourself, you find no memory to rely on. The familiarity came from the shape of the environment, the spacing of buildings, the sound of traffic, the way light rests on brick. Your brain matched these elements to countless other streets you have known. The familiarity came from patterns, not specific recollection. This experience can be unsettling because it challenges the sense of control over your own mind. You are used to believing that recognition requires memory. If you recognize something, you expect to know why. When the recognition stands on its own, without history attached to it, the moment feels slightly out of place, as if something is occurring beneath the surface of awareness. Emotional familiarity is even harder to trace. You may meet someone and feel trust or caution before words are exchanged. You may feel drawn toward a person who has not yet revealed anything meaningful. You may feel distance from someone who has been nothing but kind. The emotional brain responds to posture, tone, pacing, facial microexpressions, and subtle behavioral cues. These cues resemble patterns stored from past relationships. The familiarity comes from the emotional match, not the person themselves. For example, you may feel immediate calm around someone who speaks with the same quiet steadiness as a teacher or friend from childhood. You are not remembering the teacher. You are recognizing the emotional environment the tone creates. Likewise, you may feel uneasy with someone whose rhythm of speech matches a past figure who once disappointed or hurt you, even if the new person has done nothing wrong. The emotional brain organizes experience through resemblance. Familiarity without context arises when the match is strong enough to trigger a response, but not strong enough to produce memory. Dreams complicate this further. Many dreams store emotional impressions without storing narrative detail. A dream may contain a landscape, a voice, a certain kind of silence. Months or years later, you may encounter a moment that carries the same emotional pattern. The familiarity feels uncanny. You may believe you are remembering a dream, but the details of the dream are gone. Only the emotional resonance remains. The recognition arrives without story. Consider someone who dreams of walking through a large room filled with quiet conversation and warm light. They forget the dream upon waking. Later, they attend a gathering in a real room with similar light and hum of voices. They feel that they have been there before. The familiarity is real. The context is missing. The dream created the pattern. The present moment matches it. Sometimes familiarity without context appears in moments of transition. When your identity shifts, leaving a job, ending a relationship, moving to a new place, you may feel fragments of memory rising without shape. These fragments signal earlier times in your life when you felt the same uncertainty or openness. The brain links the present to the past through emotional state rather than through specific events. You recognize the feeling, not the scene. There is also a form of familiarity rooted in the body. The nervous system remembers postures, breathing rhythms, and muscle tensions that match certain emotional states. If you once held yourself a certain way while experiencing hope or fear, the same posture later can evoke the emotional memory. The familiarity lives in the body, not the mind. You feel it before you can think it. For instance, sitting in a particular way may remind your body of waiting at a childhood kitchen table, even if you cannot recall the memory itself. The familiarity arrives without narrative. The body recognizes itself. Because of this, familiarity without context often carries a sense of depth. The moment feels meaningful, as if part of a larger story you cannot yet see. The mind tries to explain this by searching for a matching memory. When it fails, the feeling does not disappear. It remains present, quiet and persistent. The familiarity becomes something you notice but cannot place. This experience does not point to something supernatural or hidden. It reveals how much of your life is shaped by patterns beneath awareness. You move through the world guided not only by what you remember, but by how your mind and body store experience. Familiarity without context is the mind recognizing a shape it has seen before, even when the memory of the original moment has faded or never formed clearly enough to recall. It is recognition without story. It is knowing without knowing why. There are memories that feel real, but do not carry a sense of when they happened. You can picture the moment. You can recall the texture of the room or the tone of someone's voice. But when you try to place the event on a timeline, it slips. The memory has no date attached to it. It exists, but it does not belong anywhere specific. It sits in the mind without a timestamp. The brain does not store memory as a complete record. It stores fragments that are later assembled into something that feels like a scene. Some fragments are sensory: the color of sunlight on a floor, the sound of footsteps, the smell of a hallway. Other fragments are emotional: comfort, tension, curiosity, fear. When you remember, the brain reconstructs the moment by pulling these fragments together. But the piece of information that marks when it happened is often missing. Time is one of the first details memory lets go of. Imagine remembering yourself sitting at a kitchen table. You can see your hands on the wood surface. You can remember the sound of a refrigerator. The memory feels vivid. But when you try to decide whether you were 6 years old, or 16, or 23, the event refuses to settle. You know the moment happened, yet it floats. The mind forgot to tag it with time. This is common because memory and identity do not rely on exact sequence. The brain cares more about meaning than chronology. If a memory supports how you understand yourself now, it stays active. If it does not support that understanding, it may fade or reshape. The timeline is secondary. The emotional relevance is primary. For example, if you see yourself as someone who learned to be careful with trust, your memory may highlight moments of being let down. Those moments may appear grouped together, even if they happened years apart. The brain clusters them by feeling, not date. The result is a sense that certain experiences define you, even when the timeline is unclear. The memory remains, but the timestamp dissolves. Sometimes a memory without time feels like déjà vu. You encounter a situation that resembles a remembered emotional pattern. The memory comes forward in feeling rather than image. You cannot recall where the original feeling came from, but the recognition is strong. The memory has become detached from its original context. The mind stored the emotional pattern without storing the when. Dreams complicate this even further. Dreams are built from memory fragments, but they rarely carry coherent time. When a dream leaves a strong emotional impression, the emotional memory may stay. Later, when you encounter something that matches the dream's emotional tone, the familiarity can feel inexplicable. A memory exists without a timestamp and without clarity. You recognize something that may not have happened in waking life at all. Memory also shifts with repetition. A story you have told many times becomes polished. The details may change. The feeling may intensify or soften. The memory becomes something shaped for telling, not simply for recalling. Over time, you may forget whether the story reflects the event or simply the version of the event that you learned to repeat. The timestamp fades because the memory has been reconstructed. Consider remembering a conversation that changed the direction of your life. At the time, it may have felt simple or ordinary. The significance came later, when you looked back and assigned meaning. The memory becomes the moment everything shifted. But the shift may have been slow, spread across days or months. The mind chooses a single moment to represent the transition, because a story feels easier to hold than slow change. The memory gains importance but loses time. There are also memories stored physically rather than mentally. Certain postures or breathing patterns are linked to emotional states. You may feel a memory rise in your body before you find the image or the narrative. Your shoulders tense in a way that matches how you once held fear. Or your breathing softens the same way it did during a comforting moment. The memory is embodied. The timestamp is missing because the memory was stored not in narrative, but in the nervous system. If someone touches your back in a certain way and you feel safe without knowing why, the body is remembering. The when does not matter to the body, only the meaning does. In childhood, memory often forms without stable time markers. Young children do not track years or seasons clearly. They mark life through patterns of emotion and environment. A child remembers the feeling of waiting, the sound of a particular voice, the safety of a particular room. Later, those sensations return as memory without date. You may remember the feeling of being held, but not when or by whom. The timestamp was never stored because the brain had not yet developed that part of memory processing. Even strong memories can lose their timestamps with age. As years pass, separate events that share emotional tone may begin to merge. You may remember comfort as one memory rather than as many. You may remember loss as a single wave rather than as individual moments. The emotional pattern becomes the memory. Time falls away. The mind organizes memories to maintain a sense of identity, not historical accuracy. The missing timestamp does not make the memory false. It means the memory has become something more internal. It no longer lives in the past. It lives in the present as part of who you are now. There are times when you remember something clearly, yet when you look for evidence, nothing supports it. The place feels familiar, the face seems known, or the event seems certain. But no matter how you try to trace the memory, it leads nowhere. The edges stay blurry. The details shift each time you examine them. It is not a lie and not an invention in the deliberate sense. It is something the mind has created from fragments. This is phantom recall, remembering the shadow of something that wasn't. Memory does not capture events like a camera. It works more like a painter, building scenes from strokes of color and impression. When the brain remembers, it reconstructs the memory based on stored pieces. Sensory traces, emotional reactions, and knowledge of similar events all blend together. If the pieces fit well enough, the mind accepts the reconstruction as real. The memory feels true because it follows the logic of your experience, even if the event itself never happened. Imagine believing that you once visited a certain park as a child. You can picture the playground. You can picture the tall trees. You can even recall the light on the ground. But when you ask family members, no one remembers going there. There are no photos. There is no reason you would have been in that place. Yet the memory persists. The park you remember might be built from pieces of several different parks. The slide from one, the trees from another, the lighting from a moment that had nothing to do with parks at all. The scene becomes real because the mind arranged the fragments into a coherent whole. Phantom recall often forms around emotional needs. If you needed comfort at a certain point in life, the mind may create or exaggerate a memory of being comforted. If you needed to feel independent, the mind may create a memory in which you stood alone, making a clear decision. The memory supports your understanding of yourself. The event feels true because the emotional meaning is true. The factual accuracy becomes secondary. It also happens when you try to explain a feeling that arrives without a clear origin. If you feel sadness when entering a quiet room, your mind may try to connect the sadness to a plausible memory. You may recall sitting alone in a different quiet room as a child, even if that memory is only loosely real. The mind fills in the blank to create continuity. The emotional state becomes the anchor, and the memory forms around it. Stories told by others can also become phantom recall. If someone tells you a story about your childhood many times, your mind may begin to store it as a memory. You may see it in first person. You may believe you remember the expression on someone's face or the temperature of the air. This happens because the brain uses imagination and memory in similar ways. If you imagine a scene often enough, the brain may treat the imagined version as lived experience. The line between remembering and imagining is thin. Dreams play a strong role here as well. Dreams use emotional and sensory fragments from waking life to create new combinations. You may dream of walking with someone who is no longer alive. You may dream of a house that feels familiar but does not exist. When the emotional weight of the dream is strong, the impression lingers. Later, you may feel that the dream came from a real moment. The sense of familiarity is the same. The mind does not always separate dream from memory clearly. If a dream reflects a deep emotional truth, the mind may let it stand beside real experiences. Consider dreaming of sitting beside a lake, talking with someone you miss. The conversation is gentle, and you feel understood. The next time you think of that person, the calm is what you remember. Your mind may attach that calm to a real place or event. The dream becomes a memory because the emotional truth mattered more than the source. Phantom recall can also form when memory fades. When you cannot remember an event clearly, the brain fills in the missing pieces with the most likely details. If the memory gets repeated or revisited, the filled-in version becomes stronger than the original. You may become convinced that you remember something exactly as it was, even though the memory has been reshaped. The reshaped memory feels real because it has been reinforced multiple times. This type of recall does not mean your mind is unreliable in a harmful way. It means your mind is always trying to create meaning. Memory is a tool for identity. The stories you tell yourself about your past shape how you see yourself now. When the story has gaps, the mind fills them in. The phantom memory becomes part of your narrative because it fits. There is also a protective aspect. Some experiences are too heavy or confusing to remember directly. The brain may alter the memory to make it easier to live with. It may soften certain moments or rearrange them to remove conflict. The result feels like clear memory, but it is a gentler version. The shadow memory is not accidental. It is adaptive. Phantom recall shows that memory is not a record of the past. It is a reflection of the self. What you remember because it supports how you understand who you are. Even when the memory is built from fragments of things that were never one event, the emotional truth inside the memory remains real. The shadow points to something meaningful, even if the event itself never existed. There are times when a moment repeats itself, not in fact, but in feeling. You look around and think, I have been here in this exact way before. It is not the simple déjà vu that passes like a wave. This one feels layered, as if the moment has returned on purpose. The gesture, the light in the room, the line of thought forming in your mind. Each part feels identical to something you cannot quite locate. The sensation is not just familiarity. It feels like replay. The mind relies on patterns to make sense of experience. Most of what you do each day is guided by memory of how you have acted in similar situations. When the present matches one of these patterns closely, the brain activates the same neural pathways that were used before. The moment feels repeated because your brain is responding as though it is. The experience is real, but the sense of repetition comes from how the mind recognizes the situation. Think about making coffee in the morning. You go through the process without thinking. You fill the kettle, you reach for the mug, you stand waiting for the water to boil. The actions are familiar, but you do not question them. The brain has stored the sequence as routine, but sometimes even a routine moment can feel heightened. You catch yourself in the act and feel that the scene is repeating itself with unusual clarity. The awareness turns something ordinary into something eerie. The repetition you feel is not about the physical actions. It is about recognizing the mental position you have occupied before. Emotional states repeat too. If you have ever stood at the edge of a decision, unsure and hopeful at once, that emotional state may return many times in life. The details of the situation change. New cities, new relationships, new years, but the feeling is the same. When the emotional state matches closely enough, the brain treats the present as a rerun of the past. You may not remember the original moment clearly, but the familiarity of the emotion makes the scene feel like a replay. There are moments when the repetition feels more specific, as if the mind is recalling a particular time. You might be speaking to someone and know what they are about to say, not because you have heard it before, but because you recognize the emotional structure of the conversation. You know the rhythm. You know the tone. You know where the silence will fall. The moment plays out like a script you remember, but never learned. This is the brain predicting based on stored patterns. It feels like déjà vu because the predictive memory activated before the sensory memory caught up. Dreams often contribute to this sense of replayed reality. A dream may contain fragments of places and emotions that you do not consciously remember. Later, when you encounter something that resembles the dream, the familiarity feels strong. The dream provided the emotional and sensory framework. The real moment fits into that framework. You feel like you have lived the moment before, even though your recall is vague. The dream and the waking experience overlap in the mind. Imagine dreaming of sitting with someone and speaking quietly about something that matters. The dream felt calm and heavy at the same time. Weeks later, you sit in a similar quiet conversation. The feeling returns. The moment seems to echo the dream. You feel that you have been there already. The dream memory does not appear as a clear picture, only as emotional recognition. The moment feels replayed, even though the memory comes from sleep. Sometimes the sense of replay comes from unresolved moments in the past. When something felt unfinished, the brain keeps the memory active. If you later enter a situation that matches the structure of that unfinished moment, the brain signals recognition strongly. It feels like you are reliving something, because the mind is offering a second chance at resolution. The replay is not a copy of the past. It is the mind showing that the past still holds weight. This can happen in relationships. You may find yourself drawn to someone who evokes the same emotional dynamic as someone from earlier in your life. The conversations feel like continuations. The arguments follow familiar paths. The comfort feels the same. The mind recognizes the pattern and responds as though it is returning to something known. The moment feels replayed because your emotional memory is active. There is also the body's memory. The nervous system stores responses to stress, safety, longing, and connection. When the body recognizes a state it has been in before, the feeling arrives before the story does. You may say, "I've felt this exact moment before," even when you cannot place it. The memory is physical rather than narrative. The sensation of replay comes from the body returning to a known posture. Replayed reality is not a glitch. It is a sign that the mind organizes experience through familiarity. The moment that feels repeated is one where the emotional, sensory, and cognitive patterns align so closely with something stored that the brain treats them as the same. You are not reliving the past. You are seeing the shape of experience, and the shape is familiar. There are moments when something feels familiar before it happens. You step into a room and already know where your attention will land. You hear the first word of a sentence and already understand the tone of what will follow. The recognition comes first. The experience comes second. It feels as if memory is moving backward in time, as if the past is arriving from tomorrow instead of yesterday. This does not mean that time is breaking or that your mind is crossing into something impossible. It means the brain is noticing patterns faster than your awareness can name them. The brain is always predicting. It prepares for what comes next based on what has come before. Usually, the prediction and the event happen so close together that you do not notice the gap. But when the prediction is strong and precise, the moment feels like a memory returning before the present has even formed. Imagine standing at a bus stop in a city you have never visited. You watch the traffic. You listen to the rhythm of footsteps. A certain arrangement of sound and space matches something stored deep in memory. though not as a complete scene. You feel certain that you know what will happen next. A bus will pull in. A person wearing a green jacket will step forward. The feeling arrives first. When the moment plays out and matches the feeling, it seems like a memory. But the memory was not of a specific event. It was recognition of a pattern that the brain has seen in different forms many times. The brain works by association. It groups similar experiences together. If you have lived through many quiet mornings, many tense conversations, many moments of still waiting, the mind holds these as emotional clusters. When the present aligns with one of these clusters, the mind signals familiarity. The familiarity can feel so strong that it seems anchored to a specific memory, even when no such memory exists. Sometimes the recognition arrives with words. You may think, "I've been here before," even when logic says you have not. The thought can feel certain, but the certainty comes from emotional match, not physical repetition. The brain stores the posture of attention, the quality of light, the rhythm of your breath. When these align closely with a stored pattern, the mind announces the match before experience completes. Dreams play a role in this as well. Dreams often store emotional impressions more strongly than narrative detail. You may dream of a moment that feels full, heavy, or calm, but forget the content of the dream. Later, when a waking moment carries the same emotional tone, you feel like you remember the future. The recognition is real, but the memory comes from the dream rather than from the future. Picture dreaming of speaking with someone under a warm, low light. The conversation feels open and steady. There is no specific sentence that stays with you. The dream fades. Weeks later, you sit with someone in a similar warmth and silence. The emotional texture is the same. The brain signals familiarity. The recognition appears before the experience unfolds. It feels like memory arriving from ahead. There are also cases where recognition comes from longing. When you have wanted something for a long time, any moment that resembles the shape of fulfillment may feel like it already belongs to your history. A desired experience can be rehearsed in the mind many times before it becomes real. When it finally happens, the brain reads it as memory returning, not event beginning. The mind has walked that path many times internally. Consider someone who has imagined leaving a familiar place to start a new life elsewhere. They may picture the new apartment, the way the morning will feel, the way their body will settle into the new routine. When the moment finally arrives, the recognition is strong because the mind has already lived it many times. The past seems to arrive from tomorrow because imagination has already shaped the scene before the experience occurs. Recognition can also move faster than conscious processing. When you enter a situation, your brain takes in details, tone, distance, movement, light, before you become aware of them. It uses these inputs to predict what the moment means. If the prediction is correct, the moment feels remembered. You may feel that you are stepping into something already known. This does not require mysticism. It shows how much of thought happens before awareness notices. The body participates too. Muscle memory recalls posture and breath from earlier states. If the present moment places your body in a shape that matches a shape from the past, the memory may surface before the event completes. You may feel recognition before knowing what you are recognizing. For example, the way someone tilts their head while listening may match someone you once trusted or someone you once feared. Your body responds before your mind identifies the connection. The emotional response feels like memory of the future because the recognition is faster than conscious thought. These moments reveal how the brain blends past, present, and imagined futures. The mind is not a linear record. It works by resonance. When a moment carries the same shape as something stored deeply, the mind responds as if the moment has already happened. The recognition outpaces experience. The memory seems to lean forward. The past arrives from tomorrow because the mind is always preparing the present from one it already knows. There are moments when the mind gives you a memory that feels complete, yet when you examine it, you notice it is built from fragments. The setting is vague, or the sequence is unclear, or the people in it seem blurred. The memory feels real, but it lacks the solidity you expect from something that actually happened. The brain sometimes chooses illusion when the alternative is uncertainty. It is easier to accept a simplified story than to sit with gaps and questions. Memory is not stored as a recording. The brain keeps pieces of experience, and when you recall something, it reconstructs the event from those pieces. It uses emotion, sensory detail, and context to rebuild the moment. If the pieces do not fit together cleanly, the brain may fill in the missing parts with what should be there. The illusion is not deliberate. It is the mind trying to create meaning. Imagine remembering a conversation during a difficult time in your life. You recall sitting with someone who comforted you. You remember the warmth of the room, the tone of their voice, the sense that you were understood. But when you try to recall the exact words, nothing comes. The memory feels emotionally true, and that truth matters more to the brain than factual detail. If you try hard to remember, your mind may begin adding phrases that match the feeling. The illusion supports the emotional reality, not the historical one. The brain does this often when emotions are strong. If something frightened you, your memory may exaggerate the size of the threat. If something felt safe, your memory may soften the rough edges. The mind is trying to make sense of how the event shaped you. The direct facts matter less than the meaning the experience carried. The memory becomes a mirage, visible, believable, but not fixed. The mind also uses illusion when the story of your life needs continuity. You need to feel that your past connects to your present. When there are gaps in that story, the brain fills them. It creates memories that support who you believe you are now. If you see yourself as someone who grew stronger through difficulty, you may remember events as harder than they were. If you see yourself as someone who was always independent, you may forget the times when others supported you. The illusion allows your identity to stay coherent. Consider someone who believes they have always loved reading. They may remember themselves as a child, sitting with books every evening, but perhaps in reality, they only began reading often in adulthood. The memory shifts to support their current identity. It does not feel like a lie. It feels like continuity. The mind favors a story that feels whole. Sometimes the brain creates a false sense of clarity to avoid uncertainty. When something confusing or overwhelming happens, the mind may store the emotional reaction but not the details. Later, when recalling the moment, the brain uses imagination to fill the gaps. The imagined version feels cleaner and easier to hold. The illusion replaces the discomfort of not knowing. This can happen with memories of conflict. You may remember clearly what you said, but not what the other person said. You may remember how you felt, but not why the argument began. The brain prioritizes the emotional signal, hurt, anger, disappointment, over the factual record. The memory becomes something shaped by how you needed to survive the moment. Dreams also contribute to mirage-like memory. Dreams borrow from emotional patterns stored in the mind. You may dream of being in danger, or being held, or being lost. The emotional clarity is strong, even if the scene is strange or disjointed. Later, when you experience something in waking life that matches the emotional tone of the dream, the brain may attach the dreamed feeling to a real memory. You may believe you remember something you only felt in sleep. For example, if you dream of walking through a quiet place feeling at peace, and later find yourself in a similar quiet setting, you may believe you have been there before. The memory feels real because the emotion is familiar. The mirage forms where emotional and sensory patterns overlap. There are times when the mind uses illusion as protection. If a memory is painful, the brain may blur or reshape it. You may remember being alone when someone was actually there. You may remember being calm when you were frightened. The illusion helps you continue functioning. The mind is not trying to deceive you. It is trying to reduce harm. Physical memory influences this as well. The body stores emotional states. When you feel a certain tension in your shoulders or a certain rhythm in your breath, the body recalls the emotional meaning even when the mind cannot recall the event. The memory lives in sensation. The mind may later construct a story to explain the sensation, even if the story is not historically accurate. The illusion organizes the experience so that it can be understood. Memory as mirage is not failure, it is adaptation. The brain chooses coherence over accuracy, continuity over uncertainty, meaning over detail. The memory you hold is shaped by what mattered, not only by what happened. The illusion is a reflection of how you made sense of your life, even when the facts did not offer enough to hold on to. There are times when you feel as though you have lived through parts of your life that never actually happened. You may feel nostalgia for a time you cannot describe. You may feel grief for something you never lost. You may feel homesick for a place you cannot name. These experiences form like chapters that should exist in your memory, yet there is no event, no date, no person, no scene to attach them to. The feeling arrives with weight, but the story remains unwritten. The mind does not only collect memories of events, it also collects emotional states, imagined futures, longings, and unfinished needs. These can form internal narratives that feel as rich as real experience. When a certain emotional pattern has repeated many times in your life, hope, disappointment, longing, curiosity, the mind may begin to treat the emotional pattern as a chapter of your personal history, even if no single event explains it. The feeling becomes the story. Imagine someone who grew up feeling a quiet sense that something important was missing. They may not remember any dramatic loss. Nothing specific happened to create that feeling. Yet, years later, they may look back on their childhood as though that absence was a defining event. The chapter exists emotionally. The pages describing it do not. The mind builds narrative around the emotional shape rather than around actual memory. There are also unwritten chapters that come from imagined futures. When you hope for something strongly, love, recognition, belonging, you may picture it many times in your mind. You may rehearse conversations, moments, or whole eras of your life that have not happened. If these imagined experiences feel vivid enough, the mind stores them as emotional memory. Later, you may feel that you have already lived through something that has not occurred. The emotional memory has arrived before the event. For example, someone who hopes for a certain kind of relationship might imagine walking through a city beside someone they care for. They may picture the tone of conversation, the style of silence, the comfort of shared space. The imagined experience becomes familiar. When they one day find themselves in a real moment that resembles the imagined one, they may feel as though they are returning to it rather than arriving there for the first time. The chapter was felt long before it was lived. Dreams contribute to these unwritten pages as well. Dreams use emotional fragments to build scenes that feel meaningful, even when they do not follow logic. If a dream carries strong emotional weight, the impression remains. You may not remember the dream, but the emotional memory becomes part of your internal landscape. Later, when waking life creates a similar emotional configuration, the familiarity of the feeling suggests that you have lived the moment before. The chapter exists without text, Sometimes the unwritten chapters come from silence, moments of life where something significant could have happened but didn't. A choice you never made, a conversation you never had, a path you almost took. The emotional trace of that possible life remains. You may feel tied to a version of yourself you never became. The chapter is the life that could have been. The feeling stays even when the events are absent. Consider standing at a crossroads and choosing one direction. The other path continues in your mind. You imagine who you might have been if you had chosen differently. Over years, that imagined version of you becomes familiar. You might feel that you remember experiences from that path, even though they never happened. The emotional identity forms as though the pages were written. There are also unwritten chapters shaped by relationships that never fully formed. You may meet someone and feel an immediate emotional recognition. You might sense potential for connection or belonging, but the relationship may not develop. Still, the emotional outline of what it could have been remains. You may feel memories of conversations you never had or places you never visited together. The chapter exists as potential rather than event. The mind does this to maintain coherence. Identity is not just the story of what happened. It is also the story of what felt possible. The imagined experiences, the near misses, the hopes that never came to fruition, they shape you as much as your actual history. The unwritten pages hold the versions of yourself that could have existed. They influence how you see the world, how you respond to others, how you move through time. The body remembers these unwritten chapters too. Certain songs, scents, or gestures may bring forward strong emotional responses that you cannot place. You may feel warmth, sadness, longing, or steadiness without knowing why. The memory is real, even if the event is not. The body stored the emotional configuration. The mind did not attach it to a scene. The chapter is present as feeling, not story. Sometimes, when someone asks about your past, you may feel the urge to describe these chapters. You may feel that there is more to your history than what you can say. You pause, not because you are withholding, but because there are no words for things that did not happen but still shaped you. The memory is emotional, not narrative. The mind created meaning where experience was incomplete. The unwritten pages sit between memory and imagination. They reflect the inner life that continues alongside the external one. They are not mistakes or distortions. They are evidence that your life is not only what occurred, but also what was felt, hoped for, feared, and nearly lived. There are moments when you move through life and realize that you already knew how you would speak, stand, or react. You may enter a conversation and feel the words forming before the other person finishes their thought. You may walk into a new space and sense how your body should hold itself there. The experience feels like familiarity, but it does not come from memory. It comes from something quieter. The psyche rehearses life before it happens. This rehearsal does not look like deliberate planning. It happens in the background of the mind. The brain is always predicting. It tries to prepare you for what comes next by drawing on patterns you have seen before. If the present moment resembles something internal, even if that internal experience was imagined and not lived, the brain acts as though it has already practiced the situation. Consider how children play. When a child lines up stuffed animals and teaches them, or pretends to be the one giving instructions or comfort, they are rehearsing roles that they believe adulthood will require. The rehearsal begins long before the actual moment arrives. The same thing continues in adulthood, but it becomes internal. You picture conversations before they occur. You imagine reactions you have not needed yet. You hold emotional positions in your mind before you meet the situations that match them. Sometimes this rehearsal comes from watching others. You observe how people speak in conflict, how they show affection, how they leave rooms, how they hold disappointment or joy. The psyche takes these patterns and stores them. Later, when you find yourself in a similar emotional structure, the response emerges already formed. You may speak a sentence and feel like you have said it before. The repetition comes from the rehearsal that happened while watching someone else's life. There are also rehearsals shaped by longing. When you want something deeply, connection, stability, recognition, you may imagine the situations in which that feeling might occur. You rehearse the emotional state of belonging or standing on your own or being seen. The rehearsal is not fantasy in a dramatic sense. It is emotional preparation. The mind tries on the self it hopes to become. For example, someone who has spent years wanting to feel comfortable in their own presence may have moments in which they imagine themselves sitting alone in a quiet room, at ease. The scene may not have happened in real life yet, but the psyche practices the feeling. When the real moment eventually comes, the body and mind move into it smoothly, as though they have been there before. Dreams can be rehearsals too. Dreams are often emotional simulations. You may dream about losing something, finding something, telling the truth, remaining silent, reaching for someone, or walking away. The dream gives shape to an emotional posture. The memory of the dream fades, but the emotional rehearsal remains. Later, when the waking world presents a situation that matches the emotional tone, you act with surprising clarity. The clarity comes from the rehearsal that happened while asleep. This can explain why some experiences feel calm even when they are new. You may begin a new job or relationship or creative project, and people may ask how you feel prepared. You might not have any memory that explains it, yet you respond with steadiness. The psyche has spent years rehearsing the feeling of stepping into something like this. The rehearsal was internal, gradual, and unspoken. There are also rehearsals that form from unresolved experiences. If something in your past felt unfinished, the mind keeps working on it. You may think through conversations you never had or endings that never occurred. You may imagine what you would say if you saw someone again. These imagined dialogues are not just thoughts. They are emotional exercises. The psyche is preparing for the chance to close what was left open, even if the moment never comes. The rehearsal shapes how you respond to future situations that carry the same emotional tone. The body participates as well. The nervous system remembers states. If you once braced yourself often, your body may rehearse bracing without your awareness. If you once allowed yourself to relax only in certain conditions, your body may rehearse that too. Then, when a moment arrives that matches either pattern, the body responds as if cued. The rehearsal lives in muscle memory. Posture, breath. Imagine someone who spent their childhood stepping carefully, trying not to upset anything around them. Their shoulders may lift slightly, their breath may stay shallow, their steps soft. Years later, even in safe environments, the body may return to that posture without conscious thought. The psyche rehearsed caution for so long that it became automatic. On the other side of that, someone who experienced consistent stability may carry a posture of ease into uncertain situations. They may seem grounded, even when nothing is predictable. Their body rehearsed trust. Their emotional memory holds a script that says the moment will settle. Silent rehearsals can also explain moments of strong intuition. If you walk into a situation and feel that something will go well or poorly, the feeling comes from pattern recognition. The psyche has rehearsed responses to similar emotional environments. The recognition is not prediction in a mystical sense. It is preparation meeting context. These rehearsals are quiet, subtle, and ongoing. The psyche practices becoming a person before life fully calls for that version of you. The rehearsals do not happen in language. They happen in emotional tone, gesture, rhythm, breath, and attention. The life you have not lived yet is present in the way you are already learning to meet it.